Hey everybody, happy Monday and welcome to another Techstrong TV episode. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon. Today is Monday, December 6th. We are very close to the end of the year, but we've got lots going on between now and December 31st. We're going to kick off today's conversations with one between Alan and Michael Cucci, who is the VP of Product at PagerDuty. And Michael and Alan discuss the new capabilities in the PagerDuty operations management platform. Lots of goodness in this one, including those solutions that inject control and logic at the event layer, which is pretty cool because it actually enables organizations to instantly drive real-time behaviors and workflows within the operations management platform. Good stuff there. Alan and Michael talk about the new features and so much more. After that, Alan speaks with Larry Chinsky, who is the VP of Global IAM Strategy at One Identity. One Identity recently did some research and focuses on identity management. And they talk about why insufficient identity management is the biggest security threat of the 21st century. That's a pretty bold statement, but Larry and Alan talk about how the results of the report actually kind of back up that idea. It's a fascinating conversation, and the results of the research are fascinating as well, so definitely one worth checking out. After that, we have the Haunted Hacker podcast, and this is a great conversation that host Mike Jones has with Kevin Thomas, who is the senior software engineer in test at Blue Vector. Blue Vector is a Comcast company, and Mike and Kevin talk about pretty much all things cybersecurity. As always, Kevin has got a lot of really great insight into cybersecurity threats and hacking and grassroots efforts around cybersecurity and so much more. So definitely tune into part one of this three-part conversation that they have. We're going to be running it all throughout the week. After that, we've got our Something Old segment. This is from the recent Cloud Native Days with Kubernetes event. This one features Victor Gamow, who is the developer advocate over at Kong. And his title, the title of his presentation is Supercharge Your Kubernetes Ingress. So during his talk, Victor offers up information on how to declaratively enable security, API rate limiting, and how to add native gRPC report and support, and so much more. So it is a great presentation packed with lots of takeaways. So definitely want to check that one out as well. After that, I'm back with the news headlines, and then I have a conversation with Tim Francis, who's enterprise lead for cyber insurance over at Travelers. Tim and I talk about the Travelers Cyber Risk Index. This is a second year that I've spoken with Tim about this research that Travelers does. And in this one, we found that Travelers found that cyber risk are the top business concern among a lot of employees and in the C-suite alike. So Travelers talked to more than 1,200 business leaders, and the majority of them said that they worry some or a great deal about cybersecurity. So this is a great conversation that Tim and I have about the research. Travelers always really does a great job with their cybersecurity research. They look into all different angles. And this is really one worth really digging into and taking a look at if you have the time. After that, I have a conversation with Jimmy Fong, who is the Chief Commercial Officer at Seon, S-E-O-N. And we talk about the topic of buy now, pay later fraud. So if you think about online sites and services such as Afterpay or Klarna or Affirm, those are kind of third-party buy now, pay later sites that are a lot of online retailers are now using to help in e-commerce transactions. But there's a lot of fraud, actually, that has kind of been cropping up as a result of these services. And so Jimmy and I talk a lot about what that fraud is and how it operates, and some of the things that consumers and businesses alike need to consider when they're looking at these services in their retail. After that, I have yet another in conversation. This one is with Jimmy Ventura, who is the senior security strategist over at Mimecast. And we talk about phishing, brand impersonation, and other social engineering attacks and how they are more difficult for victims to identify and why. So this is a great conversation about that next generation of phishing and the complexity that is in phishing attacks and how businesses and consumers alike can protect themselves against it. It's a great conversation. After that, I've got the webinars preview for you. And then Mitch Ashley comes on with his Analyst Corner segment. He's got two conversations today. In the first one, he speaks with Lance Knight, who is the Chief Operating Officer and President at ConnectAll. And they discuss the new Value Stream Designer product from ConnectAll, and it's basically a new and free tool to map out the software value stream. Good stuff there. And then after that, Mitch speaks with Sam Backen, who is the Director of Product Marketing at a company called OneSpan. They talk about the idea of super apps and what they are, and also mobile security in general, how attackers may look to exploit users in exploit users in the vulnerabilities in mobile apps, easy for me to say, and how super apps can actually offer organizations and banks specifically to build upon their trusted application or reputation with customers. So that's a great conversation as well. Good stuff there. And then we round out today's lineup with a view with Vizard, in which Mike Vizard speaks with Mark Cheshire, who is the Director of Product for Application Services at Red Hat. And they discuss why IT organizations need a service mesh to manage APIs. And that is a fascinating conversation, especially for any organization that is in deep with APIs, and really who isn't these days. All right, so that is today's lineup, and like I said, it's a good one. We've got a great one today, lots of great conversations. We're going to get things kicked off right after these commercial messages. All right, welcome back. We're going to get things kicked off on Techstrong TV today. Conversation between Alan and Michael Cucci, who is the VP of Product at PagerDuty. They discuss new capabilities with the PagerDuty Operations Management Platform. Lots and lots of great new features, including those that inject control and logic at the event layer instantly to drive real-time behaviors and workflows. Good stuff there. Great conversation. Let's go ahead and roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode here on Techstrong TV. He's a first-time guest on Techstrong TV, but his company certainly has been here many times. I want to introduce you to Michael Cucci. Michael is VP Product, in charge of product marketing, partner marketing, a bunch of other stuff over at our friends at PagerDuty. Hey Michael, how are you?
Alan, thanks for having me. I'm doing great and excited to be here. Thanks.
It's a pleasure to have you on. Michael, I covered a whole bunch of sins up in your title, but why don't you clear it up for the audience? What do you do at PagerDuty?
I basically just focus on taking the product out to the market, both through our field and through our partners in our ecosystem. And I make sure that we're focused on addressing the most, pressing pains for our customer base and our prospects, positioning the products, making sure they're easy to understand.
Excellent. And look, Michael, PagerDuty needs no introduction to our audience. We've been following PagerDuty, I think, since I started DevOps.com. But on top of that, up until a few months ago, I always had kind of regular interviews with the PagerDuty exec team. But we were talking a little bit off camera. And, recently you guys did kind of a virtual event webinar with some recent news and announcements. For those of our audience who maybe didn't catch that, can we give them a recap?
Yeah, sure. So like you said, I think for over a decade, we've been serving the DevOps community, really focused on urgent work and critical moments in time and helping to connect developers with their applications. For the past 5 years, we've been adding machine learning to the platform, and we've started adding flexibility so that we can address more and more user challenges. So this launch really focused on 3 places. We acquired a company called Rundeck, which does automation to actually go out and try and solve problems for humans. And we wanted to insert automation at multiple points on our operations cloud. So today, what we announced last week actually was the ability as a message, as an event is coming into the platform in real time, we're able to use machine learning and scope out what it's connected to and what dependencies exist. And then if something's going wrong in real time, we can actually fire off automation to try and solve the problem. We also took Rundeck's technology and we've fully integrated it into PagerDuty's operations cloud. So now if a human is needed, so if we'll try to solve it first, but if a human's needed, we want to arm them with automation to make problem solving much, much faster. Sure.
And of course, Rundeck is our friends Alex and Damon Edwards and Alex Honor, I believe.
Yep.
Their company, and again, a company that our DevOps audience is familiar with, and folks they're familiar with. They've appeared on many, many webinars and events with us. Michael, this pattern of first sort of seeing there's a problem, alerting there's a problem, and now moving towards automating using machine learning or AI or whatever you want to call it. I'm not into that religious war. But using, machine intelligence to automate the fixing of the problem is that's so to the heart of what DevOps is about, right? And it extends beyond developing software. It's really about operations. It's a lot about operations. It's a lot about security. I was out in Vegas last week at the Qualys Security Conference, a security company. They used to do just vulnerability scanning, if you're familiar with them.
Yep.
They're all about automating now, fixing, patching, right? Because it's not enough just to say, hey, you got a vulnerability there.
Yep.
80% of these vulnerabilities are garden variety stuff that patch and be done, right?
Yeah, I think a couple things to say about that. I think, today our resources are strapped, right? We actually released something called the State of Digital Operations, but when the pandemic hit, we didn't get any new teams. We didn't get more developers. We didn't get more technical people to solve our problems. Yet the usage of digital services just shot up. And so we actually found that the skilled people, so your best developers, your highest cost, your highest skilled, are actually the ones getting hit the most. So they're the most burnt out. We calculated about 12 extra weeks every year for your very best people to be troubleshooting because of the increase on load on this stuff. And so really it's about trying to help offload those people. But we also find now developers will actually wrap automation around their solutions so that they get interrupted less, right? If they can enable more people at the organization to solve more problems, then the skilled people can keep coding and keep innovating. And then to your point, a lot of the new capabilities on our release are about flexibility, because you're right. We actually see this now. It's not just about applications anymore. It's about critical work that has to be done. By the time you can send an email or write a ticket, to get work done, it's generally too late for this urgent type of work. So another example, we had a major customer with a pipe burst, and because they were leveraging PagerDuty, we were able to get technicians into that data center. In this case, in under 30 seconds, saving tens of millions of dollars of equipment. So now everything is a digital service. Like, I think our businesses are digital, our interactions with our customers all digital. So the world has really pivoted. And what we're focused on doing is getting the time sensitive work done, the really critical work done. So that could be a legal contract in some cases. That could be a medical device, or transporting some kind of sensitive, temperature sensitive, organ transplants, et cetera. So we really are getting pulled into anything that's urgent and connected, which is just about everything today.
Yeah. So, and that's another huge theme that I think we're seeing. Spoke also last week to a company big in IoT security, IoT stuff. When we talk about digital transformation now, it's not just, oh, my server's down, or, this application is not feeding into the database, or not that those are trivial. They're not trivial things, right? Server down is a lot of money to many companies. But when you look at it versus, hey, is this organ transplant going to be viable? Because I got a guy waiting for a heart or a kidney or a liver or something over here. It takes it to a whole new level, right? The kind of mission, it means mission critical is really life or death.
Yes, I agree. Also, I think the world is centered on making sure customers or patients, in that case, the whole entire company, the whole organization centers around delivering that service to that user. And I think that's also changed in the last, few years. Basically, the entire company has become customer obsessed or totally focused on customer engagement and customer satisfaction. We actually have moved our technology into customer service applications. So you can now run PagerDuty inside of Zendesk and inside of Salesforce Service Cloud, because more and more, even customer service people. So, your DevOps audience, you pointed this out twice on the call, has knocked down the wall to IT, obviously, but has now knocked down the wall into security. But what we're actually seeing is the interaction between out into customer service, actually touching the customer. And we're seeing customer service want to be able to actually automate. So imagine that, giving your customer service team the ability to actually take action like a root user, like a highly secure, highly authenticated user, but you're giving that all the way out to the customer service rep, and they can use that with your customer in real time. I mean, I think that's a good demonstration of how far we've come, over the last 5 years.
Absolutely. So, I remember interviewing Alex about PagerDuty long time ago about, where'd you come up with the name PagerDuty, right? And obviously, where'd they come up with it? And, we've come a long way since the beeper, right? And a long way since pagers and stuff like that. But with every release, it's just as you say, Michael, we're extending the alerting, fixing, further and further away from its software core, if you will, right? Where we were just looking after software kind of stuff. It keeps going further and further into the different layers of your business, whatever your business is, whether it be medical or financial or manufacturing or whatever it is, right? It's really about, in my mind, just expanding from that core.
Even hospitality, one of my favorite examples is a cruise line that uses us to make sure the VIP customers get their drink in under 3 minutes, right? Because if I order my martini at the end of the day, I want to make sure it's served to me quickly. So any urgent.
I can install that at home.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, my wife.
We have a lot of people using it for use cases like that.
It's a process. Anyway, Michael, it's a great update, but give us a little more. What else is happening at PagerDuty, if you don't mind? Maybe a peek ahead.
Yeah. So first, let me just give you a very brief 3 big parts of this announcement. So the first is using that machine learning. We've announced something called the service graph. It's a dynamic visualization of your business services, and you can see instantaneously when something's failing. So we're actually correlating across a whole bunch of different signals. Monitoring and observability is good, but you want to be able to take multiple signals to get real fidelity and figure out when something's really broken. And so we're now able to visualize that. It's an awesome tool when you have very, very highly complex services, or to your point, we can actually monitor a business service and see the human beings and the technical dependencies behind that. So that's the first piece. It's a service graph. The next is that real-time real-time logic, which we call event orchestration. So in real time, the event comes in, we can inspect it, and then we can build logic. So we can say, test it for this, or check and see if this data is connected to it. And then we can add logic there. So that's kind of real-time automation because it's happening before a human being. And that's going to be a huge benefit. The other thing you can do in real time, if you know you're going to get a human, you can start to collect diagnostics ahead of time so that by the time a human being's needed, they're being handed the intelligence that they would have collected for the first 10 or 15 minutes of the troubleshooting session. So that's kind of event orchestration that happens in real time. And then the piece with Rundeck is just giving you this kind of easy button so that when the human's needed, you've got those ability to run things. To your point of where we're going, we're really focused on being able to assemble flexible workflows across those things that I just mentioned. So flexible workflows that can operate in real time without a human. They can also understand when and how to get a human being. And then we've talked a lot about this, but we want to be able to rapidly build those workflows. Is it a hospitality use case? Is it an HR use case? Is it a legal use case? And we want to enable our customers to kind of define that very quickly and apply it to their business. We've kind of tackled, and we're kind of the champion of microservice applications, built and delivered by DevOps teams. We feel like we've been super focused there for a decade. And now, like you've been talking about, the enterprise has moved to become all digital. And we're kind of moving to tackle just any kind of work that is time sensitive. So for us, you'll see a lot of workflow flexibility coming in the following months.
Love it. It's excellent stuff. Michael, we're about out of time. I want to invite you back, though, because, frankly, it's been too long since we've had PagerDuty on here. And, we do this 3 days a week, so there's always room for more interviews.
I'd love to be back. I really enjoyed the chat. I'm looking forward to our upcoming ones.
Excellent, man. We'll leave it up to the teams to make it happen. Michael Cookie, VP of Product and all things outbound, as he said, right?
There you go.
Excellent. This is Alan Schimmel for Techstrong TV. We'll be right back.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, we are back. Next up, Alan speaks with Larry Chinsky, who is the VP of Global IAM Strategy at One Identity. Alan and Larry discuss results from a recent One Identity research that really shows that the shift to remote work and surge in cloud adoption has created an identity sprawl challenge for companies. It is a fascinating research report, and the results, they talk about them in depth, and so I definitely encourage you to check out this conversation. So let's go ahead and roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to another Techstrong TV interview. My guest for this segment is Larry Chinsky. Larry's with a company called One Identity. Hey, Larry, welcome to Techstrong TV.
Well, great to be here, Alan. I've heard a lot about you, so it's good to finally meet you and have a nice conversation with you.
Well, I don't believe the hype, but
Hopefully we'll live up to it.
Oh,
hey,
yeah.
Larry, One Identity is one of those companies where the name kind of does say it all a lot, right, in terms of what you guys do. But for those who maybe are not familiar with One Identity and where they play, why don't you give us a quick kind of core background and maybe a little bit about your own position and what you do at One Identity?
Sure. Yeah, well, One Identity is the cybersecurity division of Quest Software. And like you said, Alan, the name kind of says it all. And when you talk about cybersecurity, it's very broad, and there's a lot of different aspects and areas that covers. But what we focus on at One Identity is everything related to building an identity-based ecosystem. So that can mean anything from identity governance administration, privilege account management, web access management, Active Directory management, those sorts of tools. And so it's really putting a security framework around this huge amount of identity sprawl that we see in the market now, and then building out an infrastructure that's really centered on the identity instead of on the perimeter devices like we've seen in the past. And what I do at One Identity, I'm Vice President of Global Strategy. And so what my job is to do, and I've got field strategists that report to me that are spread out all over the globe. And so what we do is we evaluate what we see in the current cyber market trends. What types of shifts are we seeing? What types of changes are we seeing? And then we come back and we work with our engineering, development, and product management teams to figure out who do we need to buy or build, who do we need to partner with to ensure that we're providing the best measure of IT security for our customers. And so that could mean a whole bunch of different things. We like to joke at One Identity that no one can just have one job. So you have several different ones that kind of fall under that same umbrella. So anything from, I run the field execution of our global SaaS delivery program. We manage the alliance partnerships with companies that, in the hyper automation space, for example, and, robotics has become very popular over the last couple of years. And so we do that. And so a lot of different things with regards to building that better identity-based ecosystem.
Absolutely. And, look, identity, especially over the last, with COVID and everything, we moved to the cloud. The whole identity and access management space has become, front and center.
Yes.
Because, we don't have, you're logging into your corporate LAN on Active Directory,
right,
based upon that, where you're going to go and what have you. You've got direct to cloud, you've got work from anywhere.
Right.
All of these, not necessarily new because they've been around, but these are becoming dominant forms of how people access content, information.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Alan. As a matter of fact, that's something that we've been talking about for, I would say for the last 2 years, but maybe even a little bit longer. And one of the trends we've seen in cyber is we're moving from an infrastructure-centric protection model to an identity-centric verify and validate model. And you said it exactly right. When you have infrastructure devices that are protecting your individuals, you've got dual layer firewalls, network segmentation, router, port block, content filters. It's easy to get to a 100% protection model because you got so much control over them. But, especially in COVID, when we saw an extreme rapid move to remote learning, remote working, you now have to put the protection on top of the identity, not around the infrastructure. And so now you've got to try and figure out how are you going to manage these, not only the identity themselves, with the huge amount of identities that we're seeing now. We call that identity sprawl at One Identity, which is, it's not just humans anymore. It's bots, digital identities, devices, and just the identities are growing at an extremely rapid rate. And now companies are trying to figure out how do we manage these things. And so that's the issue. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Great stuff. And then, Larry, I just feel like we're remiss if we don't mention, as part of Quest Software, One Identity is one brand, one solution in a portfolio of, some really great solutions. I'm drawing a blank on some of the other ones, but we've interviewed the CEO and we know a bunch of them. So it really is, it's a great story.
Yeah, it is. And there's a lot of other tools, like people have heard of Toad, and they've heard of, some of the other tools that are really built around managing Active Directory and monitoring and reporting and logging and things like that. So there's a lot of different tools that are, some of them are tactical in nature, some of them are more strategic in nature for larger customers. But, at Quest Software, we work with organizations with very small amount of employees up to hundreds of thousands. So there's a very wide ecosystem of customers, and I think the last I saw, I think we had around 8,000 customers, and the amount of verticals, it's like 30 some odd different industry verticals. So it really is agnostic. Like, we don't focus with a specifically on healthcare or finance. We really spread across a really wide band of different types and categories of customers.
Excellent, man. Good stuff. All right. Enough of the background. Let's jump in, Larry, and talk a little bit about, you guys recently did a survey with some great results. I'm going to let you kind of, if it's okay, if you could take the lead and tell us what it's about.
Yeah, so as you can imagine, Alan, it was at One Identity. We were really curious to see how companies were managing their identities. And I think the results of the survey were, some things were surprising. I think some things were expected. But the thing that was probably most surprising is we had 1,009 customers respond to the survey. And so as you can imagine, and I think we had around 18 or 19 different industry verticals respond, companies from around 300 employees to customers well over 5,000, which is, right in there with, where One Identity fits in the space. But some of the things, some of the data that we got back, the data points, I think were very interesting. Number one, 84% of the customers that responded said their identities have doubled in the last year. We had 25% that said they increased by tenfold. And other, like 95% said they thought that managing those identities was probably one of the most difficult things they're doing. So meaning they have challenges managing those identities because they've grown at such an exponential rate. And what they're trying to do to manage that is just drop in tools all over the place. As a matter of fact, I think 51% of the respondents said that they had more than 20 tools to manage the identities. And it was 20% said they had more than 100 tools. So you can imagine, if you've got that amount of identities and you're dropping in these tools all over the place, what you've now created is sort of a fragmented or siloed management state of those identities. And then you've got another set of challenges on top of that. So the results were, like I said, they were somewhat shocking just in the huge numbers that we had of people that responded that said they had a very large challenge there. But it wasn't surprising, knowing just what we know about the market today and with remote workforce and that sort of thing. Probably the most concerning thing we got out of that, Alan, is we had 85% of the companies that responded said that their identities had more privileges than they needed to do their job on a day-to-day basis. And the problem with that is when you look at some of these ransomware attacks and things like that, most of them are occurring from credential mismanagement, meaning that the identities had more access that they needed. They may have still been a part of the organization when the individual had left. And all it takes is a little bit of access to get in there and inject that ransomware virus or worm or whatever, encrypt your data, exfiltrate it, and now you're in a big problem. And you look at some of the breaches that have occurred, they thought they were safe by having a VPN tunnel. And you got to have a credential to use that VPN tunnel. So if you can get access there, that becomes a real concern. So a lot of really good data we pulled out of that.
That is. Well, first of all, it's a nice sample size, right? You've got 1,000 results, 1,000 responses you really could take out of there. I always like, when I'm talking to people about the surveys, Larry, I always like to do this. What were the 2 or 3 biggest surprises for you
in this survey?
But right. Well, I think for us, like I jokingly say, besides the amount of customers that actually responded to this survey, because you know how those can go. But I think for me personally, running strategy and, how do we better the IT security for our customers, to hear that 85% of them, their individual identities had more privileges than they need, that is a shock to me. I never would have thought that would have been that high. And quite frankly, that's a concern. If an organization knows that, they should take steps immediately to resolve that. And there's another interesting thing we got out of that, Alan, I guess part 2 of what was surprising is that a lot of the organizations thought that managing those identities or building like a zero trust foundation was something they were concerned. I don't want to say afraid of, but that's something they had not deployed because they felt it was going to be too complicated, it was going to be too time consuming, and they thought it would be too expensive. And so to hear that, they did not want to invest in that because of those reasons was also somewhat surprising. Like it was more almost advantageous to continue with the risk than to actually do something about that. That's another thing that's somewhat surprising.
So, Larry, I've got about 25 years in cyber, with InfoSec or whatever you want to call it. And I'm not surprised by that because I'll tell you something. I remember 20 years ago talking to security folks about why not automatically block garden variety attacks.
Right.
Back then it was code red or
stuff like that.
Way back now, Alan.
Yep.
Yeah.
yeah. Well, it's 20 years.
Yeah.
And they were like, that makes perfect sense, but we can't be blocking traffic. What happens if we block something from the CEO and he gets upset because he didn't get a message out or some information? I think when you talk about something as personal in every sense of the word as identity and what comes with that identity in terms of access privileges, I think the fear is, the security person or maybe the person answering your survey says, look, I know we're giving these people overbroad, rights, and we should really bring it back or even start from a zero trust and build from there. But they also know the reality of, some VP of finance or director of HR or not an IT-related person who maybe doesn't understand that full risk comes in and says, hey, even though I only use this particular thing once a year, I need it, right? And the last thing you as the, guy on the little lower on the totem pole wants is for some exec to be, pissed about you cut his, you pruned his access privileges.
Yeah.
So it is a case where, we know it's the right thing. We know going to zero trust is going to reduce our attack surface and make us, more resilient or harder to be a victim. But getting the buy off on that, getting the executive team to say, hey, go ahead, do it. It's worth it. That's always been the fight.
Yeah.
It's always been the fight.
Well, and what we were talking about before, Alan, with the infrastructure-centric model, where the goal is to lock everything down, it's just not reality anymore for reasons you said. So what we like to say at One Identity is flexible yet controlled access. And the way you get to that, when I was talking about all these tools that we're dropping in and how it creates the siloed approach. So our approach at One Identity, we're very fortunate at One Identity that we've got the 4 primary pillars at our disposal in our company. We've got IAM, we've got IGA, we've got PAM, we've got AD management. So we've created a foundation here at One Identity that we called our unified security platform. So what that does is it takes elements from IGA, PAM, IAM, and AD management, and we merge those together. So we've created out of that what we call a correlation engine. And what that correlation engine can do is basically propagate information in and out of those type of systems and over into third-party companies like, for robotic process automation and things like that, to create, zero trust foundations and privilege access governance and things like that, stuff that you really can't do with just one set of tools. And that's one of the things at One Identity, when we go out and look, we talk to the analysts. I talk to analysts probably once a week, sometimes twice a week. When we go to some of the different shows like RSA and Gartner and things like that, we're starting to see competitors in maybe 1 or 2 of our areas sharing booths together because they're talking about the threat surface has changed and one of these just isn't going to work anymore. You've got to be able to be flexible. You got to be controlled. So you have to figure out a way to actually blend these things. I think all the analysts agree that they're not going to have these, views of just independent siloed identity tools anymore. They're all kind of converging together. And so what we've created is this unified platform that's really can be viewed as the resolution for, everything we're talking about. So we can provide the level of control. We can give the flexibility, no matter where they are, because we assume that most people are working remotely, and it's probably never going to end. And so that becomes a very interesting dynamic, and it's a little bit of a paradigm shift from, I think, what a lot of customers are looking at right now, whereas, we're going to be very reactionary and drop in something that's going to actually take care of, whatever that risk is at that time. But we've built this unified platform that can be built off. It's very modular. It's what I call a tightly integrated yet loosely coupled approach to, building your identity framework. And I think that that's really going to be the key moving forward for any organization. It's to build a secure platform, but, provide that level of flexibility that we're going to need so that CEO doesn't experience something he can't get access to.
Yep. Well, I think here's the good news too. With all this change, more remote, permanent remote, maybe less people on VPNs going direct to cloud and stuff like that, it also it's a good time to, if you want to implement zero trust or, implement a new paradigm or a new kind of model. It's a good time to do it. You're changing stuff anyway.
Yeah, it really is. Yep. And it's a lot of budgets have been opened up, when
exactly.
And I'm not going to say money is raining out of the sky and all that, but, I tell you, there's been a lot of projects that I would have thought would have been halted that we were working on when COVID really took off. They did not. And we actually have been at One Identity business as usual. And although we are working remotely here as well, there's a lot of new projects that have been, kicked off because of, they understand the risk of ransomware. And it's something that's, I think a lot of organizations think that might be something new. But as you know, Alan, we've been around a long time. That ransomware has been for many years. And that's just one element of risk that we've seen, over the last several years. But
it's the fan favorite today. Anyway, hey Larry, we're over time.
For people who want to get more information about One Identity, where do they go?
Yeah, easiest place to go is our website, oneidentity.com. That's all the information you can see there. And if you go to our leadership page, I'm one of the smiling faces on there. Get a hold of me anytime, and we'll get you taken care of.
Cool. Hey, we're going to be at RSA on Broadcast Alley doing videos all week. Maybe we'll get a chance to meet you in person there.
I'm sure I will. I'll be there. We're doing a session. As a matter of fact, it's an interesting one where we're doing a session on how to build your unified platform, starting with privileged account management. So if you've got a PAM tool, we're going to show you how to expand that out to the entire global enterprise.
Very cool. All right. Larry Chinsky from One Identity here on Techstrong TV. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Next up, Mike Jones. We have the Haunted Hacker podcast. Mike Jones is the host for it. In this one, he speaks with Kevin Thomas, who is the senior software engineer and test at Blue Vector. Blue Vector is a Comcast company, and they have lots of great things to talk about in this podcast, including grassroots cybersecurity and so much more. It's a great conversation. Let's go ahead and roll it now.
Welcome everybody to the Haunted Hacker podcast number. Kevin, give me a number for this podcast.
It is, help me out here.
Between 150 and 200.
199.
199. That's a great number. Awesome. So podcast number 199. And tonight we have Kevin Thomas. Before we get started, I'll go over a little bit of news and what's going on in the community. We just finished our 1-year anniversary. Kevin was on that show with us. And I'm still editing some of that to post up on YouTube. Other than that, just got done speaking for DHS. And the next one, I believe, is going to be for a think tank in Europe. And a couple podcasts coming up for other people. With that, I'll go ahead and get started. Kevin, glad to have you on the show. I really appreciate you coming on and spending some time with me on the weekend. Why don't you give us a little bit about your background and who you are, and we'll go from there.
So I'm Kevin, and again, Mike, thanks for having me, and really excited to be here, especially at a medium like this, Haunted Hacker, and you really be able to express some of the views and be with some great friends. And my first introduction really to the entire group was last week during the annual celebration, and it really felt like home. It really felt like, wow, this is somewhere I can come and speak and not have to be judged and worry about what I say. And I'm with like-minded people, and it was very exciting. And I think what's really, really amazing here is the community that we have here with this podcast. I think people are genuine. I think they have an amazing background, interesting group of stories that really made them what they are and defined them as human beings. And we do have that commonality. So myself, I grew up in northeastern Pennsylvania, small town. And ever since I was a kid, I just loved to toy with, at the time, pre-internet computers, like the Commodore 64. And I got myself a 300 baud modem. Nice. And I ended up hooking up with a friend that taught me 6502 assembly and getting a bulletin board set up with this 300 baud modem. Friends are like, what the hell's the matter with you? Like, what is this stuff? This is weird. This is for geeks, right? And it went on and on and on. And I had many people saying, and I'll never forget this. They're like, man, people aren't going to have computers. Only geeks have computers. This is something that's never going to catch on. This is really strange and weird. And, the sooner you accept that and get out of this world, the better you'll be in society and getting into some sort of a normal life. I don't know what a normal life is. That sounds pretty stupid. And I think back and I look to where we are today and wow, were they wrong? So I never pursued a technical degree. And I don't regret it, but I never pursued a technical degree. I was always in technology, but I went into business. I did a number of different jobs. And around 2000, I became a full-time musician. And I loved it. It was great. I mean, I got to be my own boss and play the music that I love, and it was great. And the money was good. And the money was good. And then the money wasn't so good. And then the money wasn't so good. And I ended up getting out and helped build a background investigator team for a federal government contractor. And did that for a while, built a number of different teams, got into HR for a while, and then senior HR leadership. And then most recently, I got into where I should be, into software engineering. What defines me? So when I was one of the interviewers for a reverse engineering gig years ago, we had people coming out of school, computer science majors and even masters of computer science, and we'd interview them for a reverse engineering role. And as much education that they had, and they'd been involved in many CTFs, they couldn't handle some of the most basic reversing skills in x86, or let alone ARM or even any other kind of microcontroller stuff. And eventually, I'll never forget, one of the interviewees was like, well, I went through school. I did everything I was supposed to do. How do I get started? Why can't I get a job here? Well, you can't meet the LCATs or labor cats. But what he said stuck to me. He's like, well, again, I don't get these skills in school. I can't find a book that teaches me what you want to do. So how do I do this? I didn't have an answer. So I thought to myself, I really need to, get serious about this and start writing a reverse engineering course tutorial. So for many years, I spent writing it from scratch. And today, if you Google reverse engineering tutorial, it's number one on Google. People like it. They like it. It's free. Number one, I believe in free education. I believe in universal education. But it takes you at the very beginning. It's not this very sexy hacker. This is where, what you need to do and exactly what you need to do and launch you into something in outer space that people can't keep up with. Right. It takes you into what is a computer? What does computer architecture look like? Et cetera, et cetera. But it slowly takes you through a progression, a story of how you can actually begin to understand the hardware and ultimately then reverse engineer at a very basic level. So that's where I spend most of my time. Today, professionally, I handle the develop integrations from a distributed system for a malware intrusion detection system.
Nice.
For a division outside of Comcast called Blue Vector. And in my free time, I teach. It's very important to me that I can do what I can to make sure there is opportunity for those that want to get into this field to do what they love. And that's me lecturing for quite some time. And that's it in a nutshell.
That's pretty awesome. So one thing that struck me, I was doing some Googling on my own of you and it's some of the music. The music is awesome, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I come from a music background as well. I played bass when I was in high school for bands and didn't take anywhere, but it was really interesting. And now I do some electronic stuff. But it goes to show that most people that have been in the industry as long as we have and do the things that we do have a creative streak. And either be, everybody I've interviewed either does, some sort of art, whether it be literature or drawing and painting or music or whatever. Everybody seems to have that knack for some kind of creativity. And I think that's really important in our industry. So reverse engineering, I got into computers about the same time you did with Commodore 64. I think I was maybe 12 when I got my first Commodore 64.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll never forget it. Press play on tape and I had this game that was a psychology game, and you're talking to a therapist, and you're asking her questions, and she's asking you questions. It was just really interesting how that all worked together. And I miss those days. It was very simple, very simplistic. You didn't have to worry about internet connection. And then it stepped up to the 14.4 modem, which is what I started out with. Yeah. And it was really interesting times. I mean, it moved so fast from the time of, Commodore 64 to Windows 3.1 to NT to just Windows, period. But I was not one that took on to the whole Windows system thing. I wanted something outside of the mainstream. And I'm glad I did, because I got a chance to see the other side of the fence when it came to computing. So I haven't done a ton of reverse engineering. I recently did one for a financial company on an EXE that they had produced. And I'm still kind of working on that a little bit. But reverse engineering is one of those things that it takes a lot of in-depth skill. It's not just being able to run something through IDAPRO or, being able to do a behavioral analysis. It's understanding how the components and everything within a system works together, as well as the language that's used to communicate back and forth. And I don't think a lot of people understand that. When I ask, some people what reverse engineering is to them, they tell me, oh, well, it's taking malware into a sandbox and seeing how it behaves. That's like a 10,000 foot view of the beginning of analysis, not even in-depth analysis. And you could go down a rabbit hole with reverse engineering. I mean, there's so much and there's so many interesting parts to it. What would you say, like, your favorite reverse engineering job, like the best project that you've ever done with reverse engineering and why it was so interesting to you?
So that's a great question. And I want to touch upon the art segment of it, because I think in a lot of ways, you do see this argument of math and computer science versus art and literature. Sometimes you might say, so I challenge that notion. The problem is we don't have enough people with the math and computer science that can think creatively, because having a great mathematical mind, computer science background is very, very important. But if you can't think creatively, it's going to be very, very hard to reverse engineer.
Right.
Or even engineering. And I don't think a lot of people talk about that. So that leads me to your question. I don't mean to get off topic.
That's okay.
Probably looking at the SolarWinds attack. So coming from, I know binaries very well. I know, reversing C in assembly, and I'm feeling pretty confident this is awesome. And I hear about this SolarWinds thing, and I'm okay. I'm in late in the game, and I want to examine this myself. It's a .NET binary. It's a high level language. The source code's right out there. You get DN Spy, and it's out there. Well, this can't be hard. How do we miss this? Is it, arrogant? What's up with this? Started to look into it. The way that they took advantage of people's attitudes like I had blew me away. They would base 64 strings inside an innocuous update. It was called the Business Systems Update for SolarWinds Orion product. And the brilliance of it, once they infected you, when you ran the update, what appeared to be a legitimate update, it slept for 12 days minimum. Mm-hmm. No antivirus is going to find it. Between day 12 and 14, it randomized a seed to come alive and start enumerating the Windows registry to disable all of its functionality, but it wouldn't be persistent until the system admin actually rebooted the machine, so there'd be no flags. And the system came back up at a very point in time. It's then completely vulnerable. Then and only then will it start using encryption to start sending itself through a web shell and exfiltrating data that no one will ever know. Ultimately, FireEye was the first to catch this. And it, it persisted through many government agencies and whatnot. So what does this teach me? It teaches me that we are not as creative as we need to be. Again, I'm not going to downplay the computer science and the mathematics of it. I'm not going to do that. But it takes a certain level of creativity to think differently, to find something like this. And I think that's the kind of unique talent that we need today, is someone that, maybe has done a little music, done a little art, and has a little bit of background for computer science, that can look at a binary, be intimidated, or what would appear to be a higher level language, and you're decompiling it, but you're seeing a strange series of hash tables or base 64 strings, and being able to figure out what it's actually doing. We're in a different world today. It's a very challenging world. And I'm hoping all of us in our contributions can help inspire and train the next generation so that we can start to deal with these kind of things on a scalable level. So that was probably the most interesting thing, and it was as of late.
Yeah, absolutely. The SolarWinds attack was really interesting. And, I knew when I first saw it, it had nation state written all over it because of the fact that it was hitting some of the agencies and companies that it was hitting, and really exfiltrating data out of those places. And I've got my own theories as far as ransomware and some of the attacks that we see that we assume are commercial and financially motivated, but tend to be more intelligence driven and looking for specific pieces of data. But I always find it really interesting. I think the very first one that I did some behavioral analysis on and sandboxing and actually looking at the way it worked with the system was Impact. Impact was really interesting with the fact that it was keeping track of the countries and the IP addresses and the way that the system was behaving. I found that really interesting. I had never done any kind of reverse engineering before. I was always, focused on, compromising systems and the way systems behaved and operated. Wasn't really into the whole reversing part until I actually started getting my hands on malware. And I think at that point, I went through a lot of iterations of how do I collect as much malware as possible. So I could reverse it. Because within that malware, I was finding attacks, I was finding exploits, and I was finding things that I wouldn't normally find in areas that I usually looked. And I think that's a brilliance of reverse engineering is not only do you get a chance to see how it operates, but it tells you a little bit about the person that wrote it or the people or group that wrote it. And I think that's super important today because there's so many different groups that are involved in developing this software and this code that you can't really keep a pulse on it unless you know signatures that you're looking for within that code that says, oh, hey, I know that developer. I know that group. So do you have any side projects or research projects that you do as far as like looking at all the different types of malware and maybe like keeping up with what's coming out and who's producing it?
Yeah, most of that is just pure research and experimentation. I have my own theory. So we have the Five Eyes, which are allied nations that share intelligence. I believe there is the equivalent of what I refer to in my CTF challenges that I've created called the Dark Eyes. Mm-hmm. I think there are a very talented group of Russians, Chinese, North Koreans, I don't know what other nations, that are brilliant and coordinated, that have put together a lot of these techniques that have attacked us. And in a lot of ways, we are divided and distracted, and they are not. And I look at a piece of malware and I do try to find signatures or commonalities. What group wrote this? What is their vulnerability? What are they doing? And I do see a lot of similarities. So the media will have you believe that they're all distributed groups. They might be, who knows? I think there are a core group that share intelligence that are coming at us. So the answer to your question is I spend a lot of time looking at individual pieces of malware, being completely overwhelmed by the hashing algorithms that they're doing to, I mean, I can't statically reverse a lot of binaries today. You're unfortunately dynamically running them, and like some people can actually resolve the hash tables statically. I'm not that person. I have to step through it and see what it actually is. And I'm not terribly strong on Windows internals either, which is also sets me a little bit behind, which is also a challenge. But no, I mean, I continue to look at everything coming down the pike and trying to better understand what their mind is thinking. And I have a series of CTFs called the Angels of Death, which is part of our DC 540 DEF CON group that I put out to try to help people and educate them and get them working in CTFs that are kind of non-traditional to sharpen skills to try to contribute. But that's a great question, Mike. And I don't know if there is a real good way today other than just kind of look what's coming out and continue to be awestruck. And I would say to anybody new coming into this field, don't be arrogant, be humble, be hungry. Talk to people in this industry, learn, research, and try to contribute where you can. Because when you're coming into this, whether you admit it to yourself or not, you're overwhelmed.
Oh, yeah.
This is an overwhelming field. And just understand that's good, that you should feel that way. But humility and patience, I think, will help you to better yourself and be able to contribute to this very, very critical industry.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
All right, welcome back. Next up, we've got the Something Old segment. This is from the Cloud Native Days with Kubernetes virtual event. This presentation is by Victor Gamov, who is the developer advocate at Kong. His presentation is titled Supercharge Your Kubernetes Ingress. He's got lots of great takeaways in his conversation or in his presentation. So let's go ahead and roll it now.
Hello and welcome to this presentation about Kubernetes Ingress Controller. If you see the screen, it means that the screen sharing is working. Previously, I used this screen to use with projector, but in this virtual conference setting, we're using screen sharing. So you see my screen right now, you see slides, so we're ready to go. My name is Victor Gamov, and this is a session about Ingress Controller and how you can supercharge your Kubernetes applications using some of the bits that we develop here at Kong. I work at Kong as a developer advocate, meaning that I get to talk to developers, get to talk to people about all sorts of technologies. You can find me in Twitter. This is the best place where you can reach out to me if you have any questions. Also, you can use Telegram and also follow me in YouTube. I post some of the videos about the technology regularly. In this presentation, I would like to share some of the things around how you would deploy your application on Kubernetes and how you provide external access. We will talk a little bit about what does it mean for application to be cloud native or Kubernetes native. We will talk about the specific components that Kubernetes provides in order to expose the services to outside world. In this case, it's going to be Kubernetes Ingress. I'll show you in some of my demos how you can expose this simple REST service through Ingress. And we will talk a little bit about exotic use case where we need to expose something more stateful, like HTTP2 streaming and the gRPC protocol. And I will show you how you can enable some of the advanced features without even changing the code of application by simply enabling some of the plugins that will be available in Ingress Controller side of things. All right, so in this section, I would like to introduce the concept of the Kubernetes native application and what does it mean for applications to be Kubernetes native and what kind of things from perspective of networking, from perspective of communication, you need to understand. So in our Kubernetes cluster, we deploy our applications inside of pods. Pods is a combination of the containers. These containers will be deployed to some of the Kubernetes nodes. And that's how your blank cluster looks like. So there's nothing there. So once you start deploying your applications will deploy it in the form of deployment, which is type of resource that's available in Kubernetes. With deployment, you specify what kind of image will be used to be placed inside the pod. With the number of replicas that particular deployment might contain, you can deploy multiple services. In this particular case, my order service is deployed in with 3 replicas. And in order to provide external access, usually there's a different ways how it can be done. However, there's a known type of the deployment called load balancer that will rely on the load balancer that's available on Kubernetes. So over the time, you want to deploy more applications, and Kubernetes provides nice features such as bean packing that allows you to efficiently use the resources in particular nodes and pack the services across multiple different nodes. And in this image, you can see that I added a few more services. Those services might include some analytics, billing, and so far and so on, and the different replication factors for those services. To provide external access, I also need to think about the load balancer. So the Kubernetes developers, the people who develop the Kubernetes itself, they come up with this idea of Ingress that would be essentially providing the central point to connect to your applications from outside world. So in this case, it comes, and you can think about this as a proxy server that allows you to provide the external traffic. Usually it's L7 traffic, meaning it's level 7. It's application level protocols, usually HTTP, HTTPS. And this is where we're coming into this concept of Kubernetes Ingress. Let's take a look on how does it look from a perspective of developer to start using this one. So Ingress is a Kubernetes resource that will be provisioned by Kubernetes, and it allows you to configure access from outside world to some of the services that deployed inside Kubernetes. So as you can see here, I have the service name bills, and the service name will be available through the path/bin. If user will go to example.com/bills. That's how you configure Ingress. And as you can see here, the kind of the resource is Ingress, and Kubernetes would know what to do with this. But essentially, it's if you've been in this world of the application connectivity for a while, it's the same thing that's the traditional load balancer can do. However, it's just unified and more or less standardized the way how you can configure different the load balancer or different software that implements such features. Usually, load balancer or Ingress should do things with how to secure services, how to provide some of the advanced logging, tracing, and so far and so on. There are ingresses that are available that allows you also proxy not only L7 protocols, but also L4 protocols like TCP and UDP and TLS. And so far and so on. So you can not only provide the Ingress for HTTP server. And the traditional traffic management system, like you can have canary deployment, blue and green deployment. You can have a load balancing if you're running multiple the replicas of the if you're running multiple replicas of the service. You have the load is balanced across these replicas through this Ingress. And once we have this definition of Ingress, only thing what you need to do is just do kube control apply. And what happens is that it will be received by Kubernetes API server, and after that, internally, the object Ingress will be created, and it is up to so-called custom resource controller or Ingress controller to figure out what to do with this object. So the Kubernetes only will receive these requests, receive these API calls, and after that, the controller that will be listening changes to this resource will be responsible for provisioning the paths and connectivity to particular services. In many cases, developers, when they develop the microservices these days, they need to think about multiple things apart from the thinking about the business logic, about the logic of the service and what the service will do. So in this case, the implementing some of the best practices for resiliency, like circuit breakers or rate limiting for to prevent certain services will go down because of the load and things like that, like creating kind of like a back pressure and push back the calls from the external system. Next thing is the metrics, logging, tracing, all these things to do with how you will provide this for your application, because once we go into production, we don't want to be blind and don't know what is going on with application. Some of the important components that usually developers don't think at the day one, it's usually what we call day two responsibilities, things around supporting legacy versions. So how you would gradually upgrade your APIs from version 1 to version 2. Maybe you need to provide a layer of transformation. Should you do this yourself, or should some of the API management platform handle this for you? And in this case, it would be a good idea, this proxy, this actual implementation that will be running in the listening the request for this Ingress will handle certain things for you. So all these things that I mentioned, they generally common for all applications that people develop, regardless of language, regardless of logic, regardless of the things what they implement. This stuff that is must to have. So instead of implementing this on the application level side, maybe you should be implementing this on the proxy side. So that's what the Kong does. Kong is the open source API management platform that provides wide ecosystem of plugins that are available, and you can plug into your application without code changes. So we're going to be focusing on this one during the demo. And for Kubernetes native, it also has a Kubernetes native resource that will be listening, the custom controller that will be listening changes on this Ingress resource and providing some of the interesting capabilities, on the runtime. I mentioned this, the Kong has a variety of plugins that allow external, extend functionality of application. One of the plugins here is like API Auth, the plugin that say you can define your some of the keys and get access to APIs only if this key is available as a part of request or request header. Once this resource will be created, the Kong Ingress controller will listen for this kind of plugins called Kong plugin, and after that, we'll manage internally. We'll start instance of this plugin and provide a certain configuration. This configuration would be very different on different plugins, and I'll show you a couple examples in a few seconds. Once it's done, what we still see it's a standard Ingress. However, the functionality and some of the additional features on this controller can be extended through annotations. There are some Kong-specific annotations that you can put in your Ingress resource in order to enable certain cool piece of functionality. But apart from this, it also follows the same specification of Ingress. And the cool thing is that those plugins can be changed, so you can enable multiple different plugins. And because it's a Kubernetes resource, it's all done declaratively. So you're not changing the code, you're not telling what to do, you're just telling what you want to have, and the Ingress controller will be able to do this for you. So essentially, this is how the architecture of your application would look like inside the Kubernetes. You're running your applications, you're running the Ingress controller, and they're providing the external access to the clients. And they will calling these the REST endpoints with JSON payload, and they're calling gRPC payload with some of the binary payload and things like that. So those things are available. Moreover, Kong also provides not only L7 Ingress, but also L4 Ingress. So you can expose some of the TCP streaming, and TLS services through this Ingress, which is also handy because you control this through the one endpoint. There's plenty of different features. Those are available for some of them available as a part of the open source resource. We also provide a enterprise thing, but I'm not going to talk about the enterprise thing. So majority of the things that you will be seeing today, basically all the things that we will see today are open source and available for free. So enough talk. So let me show you how this actually works in the real world, and you will understand where we're standing here. So for this, in my demo, I do have a Kubernetes cluster. I have a bunch of stuff already installed here. So this is the Kubernetes related things. I have a Kong Ingress controller installed, and I do have some of the cert manager installed. The cert manager will handle the provisioning of the certificates, so I can use like HTTPS in my Kubernetes cluster. But in my default namespace, I do have nothing. So there's nothing there, and we're going to be using one quick, three services. So first service that we're going to be using today, it's service called Back to Future. So it contains three components. So one is a deployment that will include information about this application. So when I go ahead here and I will install this into my Kubernetes cluster. So I should be able to see this application, and let me quickly show you what it does. So if I will go here and enable port forwarding to my local, I can go ahead here and create back to future, but in this case, let me do this duplicate. And I'll do this localhost. I'm using Insomnia, which is a client for REST endpoints that allows me to test different things. So the My service is the service that generates random quotes from some of the popular pop cultural phenomena, like the Back to Future, for example. When I submit this right now to the service, I'm getting some of the information, some of the quotes from Back to Future. And yeah, that works. However, you cannot rely on port forwarding for your production use cases. Like it's good for development. However, we're gonna fix this in a second. So I need to go here. So I just go and see if I do have. And I will delete this port forwarding for this application. Now, I need to expose this to outside world. And the way how to do this, we're going to be using Ingress. So this Ingress fella, right now, it's the standard, the Kubernetes Ingress doesn't have anything except the particular rule. Another thing that this Ingress will be connected to this service. So in this case, I need to deploy the service first. Service essentially just exposes things that are available in my deployment. So it will be available inside Kubernetes cluster. And after that, based on name, we also provide connection to this service through outside world. So go ahead and apply this one. I do have my service up and so this is my Back to Future service, and that's up and running. It uses cluster IP, but it doesn't have external IP. However, if I do get service, say namespace Kong, and in this case Kong proxy, I do have external access here. So this is external IP that's available. So this is what IP I will be using to hit my my service. So service is updated. Now it's time to create Ingress for this one. So go ahead, Ingress created. Before that, let me do this one first. Let me show you how does it look like. So we're going into Back to Future and we're removing Ingress for a second. So if I will try to reach this particular IP address, so if I will just do something like HTTP 34.73.2.14, we'll get some of the response from, oops, of course, 7. No routes match those values. So meaning that its response came from Kong. So meaning that someone is listening this IP address. Now, if I go and apply this one more time, applying this Ingress, so in this case, will I hit this one? Still nothing. But if I will go to and hit this Back to Future, I have a predefined Back to Future thing. Maybe during redeployments, my IP address changed. So we will fix that in a second. So that's why it's always good to rely on DNS name. So let's do this one. I have a DNS configure for this. So it's connected to my Kubernetes cluster. So I will be using just DNS name. But let's copy it here. Click done. So in this case, I can use proxy address. Okay. So when I send this, now my service is available to external. During the time when you're watching this presentation, probably this cluster will not be available, but trust me, if it will be live, you will be able to hit this one with me in this section. And we can see here that Kong is actually providing some of the headers that you can tell that is actually going through the Kong. So once it's there, so let's try to doing something fun. So for example, like when I do this, I can send request every 2 seconds, and it will just, so every 2 seconds it will submit this request, and we will see this actually is happening. Now, in some cases, I want to prevent this kind of like a unlimited access to some resources, because maybe I want to charge for this information. Maybe I want to adding some of the rate limiting in order to prevent denial of service. So how I can do this? I don't need to implement this myself. I can enable this through plugin. So I'm going ahead here and create the plugin that says Kong plugin, and it has rate free tier, and I can do only 5 requests per minute based on the caller IP address. Local policy means that it will be using the information on storing information about the sessions through some memory storage, but also the persistent storage is supported for production deployment. And as you can see here, this is the custom resource. If I will go in my Kubernetes cluster and can say get CRDs, so some of the things that Ingress controller installs some of these CRDs. So in this case, there's Kong plugins, and I'll do get Kong plugins. And I'll get nothing because no plugins installed. So I'm go ahead here and just say apply. So once I will do this, I have this plugin enabled called rate limiting. Now, as you can see here, my application is still hitting here. Nothing changed, even though I deployed the plugin. I need to enable this plugin in my Ingress. So I created this annotation, konghq.com/plugin/rate free tier, the same plugin that I just created here. This is rate free tier. So if I'll go ahead and click apply. So in this case, it will update Ingress immediately. And what we start seeing here, that now we start receiving rate limiting headers that coming to my service. And after 5 attempts, we start getting a response called too many requests, and the information about when this reset, when this thing will be reset. So in this case, we see this 12, 10. So in 10 seconds, we will have ability to reset this. Okay. Now, next thing is that I want to show you how we can enable some of the chaining of the plugins. So next thing is that I have a service that will provide some of the facts about Chuck Norris. And I will go ahead and deploy this. Also service, pretty much the same thing. It uses the same container, but based on the environment variable configuration, it will be using the Chuck Norris quote service instead of Back to Future. And I need to enable Ingress for Chuck Norris service. So I will go ahead here and click apply. Now I will be able to, let's stop this. So now I will be able to send some information about, get some information about Chuck Norris. As you can see, this is my response. Obviously, Chuck Norris so epic that his code is optimized by design. So it works. So for this one, we want to enable a different rating policy. We want to say, we want to provide a pay tier. So for example, someone would accessing this Chuck Norris API, they will be getting the 10 requests per second. per minute, I'm sorry. So, and in this case, there is a small difference between those two plugins. I also want to provide a secret key that will identify this caller with system, so we can figure out that this thing is connected. So in this case, I will be using Kubernetes secret to store information about this user key. And after that, I enable this plugin configuration based on consumer. And the consumer, the customer source, that will be handling situation of the delegating access to the secret key. And after that, providing correct calls. So when I go ahead here and I just do apply this, I will create new plugin. So if I'll go, okay, get plugins, I had paid tier and user auth plugin as well. So when I try to hit this, let's see, paid. So it's the same endpoint. And when I send this request, there's no headers. There are no headers about rate limiting because I didn't enable this in Ingress. So what I go here and enable, let's start like a one by one. So I'm going here into this one, enabling using user auth, and we can go in here and creating this one. So when I click here, now I'm getting the unauthorized. So immediately, so I updated this information, and immediately I start getting this unauthorized exception. I know this is the coming from Kong, meaning that there's no I don't have access here, even though I'm providing my API key. I didn't create a Kubernetes secret. So in this case, I need to go and create two secrets here. So I will go ahead and just do Kubernetes plugins, create check noise secrets. Create two secrets. One secret will be responsible for user one, and after that, we're going to be using this for another use case. So when I send this, I have a request 200, and now I'm using this rate limiting with 10 requests. So I will do send, and we're good, right? So it's great. Now, the one last thing that I want to do here, I also want to provide another service or layer of service to users, the service that will provide the unlimited access, like hundreds requests. So there's a platinum level, and the platinum level also will be using the Auth plugin, but in the platinum level, I will be able to configure with different, 100 of the requests. So I'm go ahead, apply this one. And if I'm going to my Ingress, I will enable all three plugins. See, now my Chuck Norris service will be responsible for all these three plugins. Now, when I click here, this one still works, and I still have 10 requests. I can send this. But if I'm providing the different API key, so in this case, Roundhouse Kick is my API key for Platinum access. Now you see here, I have 100 requests in my, and I have 99 requests left. So that's my Platinum level. So that's two plugins that we deploy for REST service. But what about non-REST services? So let's take a look on one quick one. I do have another service that will deploy another third one code service that will generate random codes from movie Dune. And after that, this service will expose those codes through gRPC. gRPC, it is a remote procedure call protocol that was created and highly influenced by some of the technologies that people at Google have, and donated to cloud native CNCF, cloud native foundation, and now it's developed in open source. A lot of services use this, and the cool thing about gRPC, it provides some of the features that REST doesn't have, like bidirectional communication or streaming of the response. So that's what we're going to be deploying right now, and I'm going to be just go ahead, show you quickly. Service is also this same old service. The last thing is that here is Ingress. And for the Ingress, I need to specify some specific things. In this particular case, I need to specify that this is the protocol gRPC, and the Conk will figure out how to connect to this gRPC service. Another thing that I need to specify here is that it's going to be using gRPC S for secure. So just give me a second. I'll just do Kubernetes, Dune, created the service, and now I'm switching back to my Insomnia, where I can use my gRPC service and call my get quote. And now I'm receiving this through gRPC. As you can see, it's a Dune call, and I'm calling gRPC server that's available on my Kubernetes cluster. Also, I can do this on gRPC streaming, and as a stream, I received 10 responses from my gRPC service. That's how you can do this. By the way, the demo of this is available. You can find this on my GitHub, and it's freely available for everyone to play around with. And that is it for today. I showed you everything that I wanted. I showed you how you can deploy your services and expose the services to outside world, regardless if you're using REST service or you're using something like gRPC. With this, my name is Victor Gamov, and as always, have a nice day.
Hey everybody, happy Monday and welcome. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the headlines. First up on DevOps.com is an article that looks at ways to bridge the developer experience. Given that the end goal of DevOps is to generate unparalleled innovation across an organization, getting the culture right is critical. Developers need an environment where they have the confidence to innovate and contribute back to their community, help grow the business, improve their skill sets, and further their careers without being limited by the people, practices, and tools around them. Above all, it's about creating the best possible developer experience in which to thrive. This article discusses what makes up a positive developer environment and focuses on some of the ways in which organizations fail to deliver an optimal developer experience, as well as some tips to help them realign their developer experience to enable them to thrive. And we look at why backing up Git repositories is so important. The IT industry has been increasing expenditure on security for years, and backup is a critical area. However, despite the growing awareness of the need for backups and the wide availability of modern backup solutions, the problem still exists. In May 2019, ransomware attacks impacted hundreds of repositories on GitHub, GitLab, and Bitbucket. Most of the data was recovered, but the cost and the amount of time spent recovering from the attack was enormous. Based on the increase in cyber threats to data on these repositories and their feature sets, which do not align with those of good backup tools, they shouldn't be considered a good backup tool themselves. This article dives into the different methods organizations can use to back up the data in their repositories effectively. Taking care of it today will help ensure a more secure future. We also have a roundup of news and information coming from last week's AWS reInvent conference. Las Vegas was teeming with oodles of announcements from AWS and its partners. And this article looks at three worth noting, specifically AWS's Private G, Graviton 3, which is the latest version of Amazon's ARM server chip, and the RDS support by AWS's DevOps Guru. Each is considered from the long view, as told by Richie Jennings, who pulls together the chatter from the web to provide the positives and the negatives. Definitely one worth checking out. All right, over on Container Journal, we provide some insight into Kubernetes' final release for the year, version 1.23. This latest edition includes 45 new enhancements to make it more mature, secure, and scalable. There are some critical changes grouped into the Kubernetes API, containers and infrastructure, storage, networking, and security in this latest release. This article looks at some of the more salient features of version 1.23 and what this means for organizations using the popular container orchestrator. And we have the latest from Mirantis, which has launched DevOps Care, which is powered by Lens, and that's a managed CI/CD service based on its integrated development environment running on Kubernetes clusters. The goal is to make it easier for developers to automate application development processes without requiring IT organizations to build and maintain a DevOps platform. Mirantis also plans to build additional extensions using the open source Lens IDE it acquired last year to expand its managed services portfolio for Kubernetes, in addition to encouraging customers to build their own extensions using a set of APIs that have been added to the Lens IDE. The launch of DevOps Care powered by Lens comes on the heels of the release of Mirantis Flow, a data center as a service platform for running both monolithic and microservices-based applications on virtual machines or Kubernetes clusters. It is designed to make it easier for IT teams to take advantage of a platform that can be deployed on multiple clouds or in an on-premises IT environment. All right, over on Security Boulevard, we look at the ongoing issue of security posture and hygiene. Posture management is still one of the least mature areas in security, even though 86% of organizations believe they follow best practices for security hygiene and posture management. That's according to a study by JupyterOne, which exposed many dangerous vulnerabilities. Nearly 1/3 of respondents said they discovered sensitive data in previously unknown locations, and 30% found websites with a path to their organizations. In addition, 29% uncovered employee corporate credentials or misconfigured user permissions, while 28% exposed previously known SaaS applications. These results clearly show there is much more work to be done among organizations in improving the overall security posture by raising awareness and making security a top priority from the top down. And finally, we look at whether the market for security hardware appliances is doomed. The shift to Secure Access Service Edge, or SASE, and software-based security solutions, which began in earnest in 2019, and the cloud displaced the data center as the internet displaced the corporate network. Hardware appliance vendors have massive install bases they still support. The majority of those are going to be late adopters. Instead of re-architecting for cloud transformation, these customers will continue to buy upgraded appliances. But cracks are starting to show in the security of those devices. This article takes a look at the evolution of sorts of security from hardware to software. And the upshot is, even though a new network architecture holds promise for a secure future, it will be decades before the hardware appliance industry goes the way of the antivirus industry. In the meantime, look for continued high growth rates for zero trust and SASE vendors while traditional network security suffers. All right, that's it for today's headlines. Please check back with me tomorrow when I'll have a fresh new batch. Until then, I hope everybody has a great day, and please, whatever you do, stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Techstrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am here with Tim Francis, who is the enterprise lead for cyber insurance over at Travelers. Tim, welcome back to Techstrong TV. I know it's been about a year or so since we talked, but it's great to see you.
Likewise, great to see you, and thanks for having us back.
You bet. You bet. So as with the last time you were here, we're going to be talking about the Travelers Cyber Risk Index. And for those of you who maybe didn't see the first interview that you and I had together. Tell us a little bit about the Travelers Cyber Risk Index.
Well, it's funny. Not that many years ago, this was a general business risk index to talk about a variety of subjects and what our customers and just businesses in general, whether they're our customer or not, were interested in and what were their concerns and kind of, I'll say the things that were keeping them up at night. And cyber years ago was kind of creeping up. And in the last couple of years, we've really focused the risks just on cyber. We still ask a broad range of issues, but much more of the questions are geared towards cyber. And cyber, once again, unfortunately, is the top concern and by a bigger margin than it's ever been.
Well, I'll tell you, if there's one thing that the pandemic has really done, it is heightened awareness for cybersecurity. So I will say that it doesn't really surprise me that it is still a top concern, and maybe even more so this year. We'll dive into the results in a minute. But you know, I wonder if just because of the fact that we are just dominated, or inundated, I should say, by headlines day in and day out about ransomware attacks and cyber threats and what nation states are up to these days. It just seems like the cybersecurity news cycle is relentless and endless. So do you think that that's contributing to that kind of overall increase in cyber threat or pain points around or paranoia, if you will?
Yeah, I do think so, right? And it's the headlines that we all see, and they are relentless and endless, never ending. I think deeper down, right? It's also evidence that not even everything that makes the headlines, companies are being affected by this, more so than just make the headlines, and that was apparent in our survey. And if it hasn't happened to you, it's likely happened to somebody that you know in a business that looks and feels a lot like yours. And so I think people are very much right to be concerned about it and thinking about ways that they can help not have it happen to them.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about some of the highlights of the report. What were some of the things that really kind of stood out for you guys in terms of both negative and positive? I mean, what did you find most terrifying?
I still think, we're still in, wherever we are in terms of dealing with the pandemic. So, it still is remarkable that cyber is the number one concern by an increasing margin. And also that it's the number one concern of small, medium, and large companies, right? Everybody's concerned about it. I think there's some good news, if you will, in that companies are more aware of it. So it does make sense that it's at the top. That's in a way a good thing. People are aware enough to know they should be concerned. That's a positive. The problem is that despite being aware of it, we asked some pretty pointed questions about what are you doing to prevent things and how secure are you, or how secure do you feel you are? And our survey results showed it's the number one concern. 25% of the companies said they had an event happen to them in the last 12 months, and yet less than half are really taking proactive steps to really do anything about it. Less than half even buy cyber insurance on top of putting the right controls in place to help at least to reduces the chances. So those two things don't really seem to go together, and that's probably the thing that's the most worrisome.
Yeah, I wonder if that has something to do with the fact that cybersecurity is such a big animal to wrangle. And I would imagine that there are certain organizations, especially small and medium organizations, that don't really know where to start when it comes to the most effective, cybersecurity.
Sure.
Position. Do you lock down your devices? Do you lock down your network? Do you, just install applications on everybody's machine and devices to make sure that, they're continually scanning for threats? I mean, there are so many ways that you can approach cybersecurity these days that I wonder if it's almost like drinking out of a fire hose.
I think there is something to that. And I think particularly on some of the smaller and mid-sized company where they don't have the people power, right? They don't maybe even have the financial resources, but if they've got an IT department that's an IT department who's thinks about keeping the business running and the computers up, and that they may be less focused on the security aspect. And so on one hand, I get that. On the other hand, some of the preventative measures, at least in my opinion, are relatively low-hanging fruit, and I think within the grasp of most computer professionals, and things like multi-factor authentication, things like maybe an EDR solution, endpoint detection and response, as opposed to antivirus. Those are not. There might be some cost, but they're not relatively expensive considering the benefit that you get for having done those things. And on the MFA front, depending on what email you're running, you may actually just be able to essentially flip a switch and turn on MFA. So I think that there's a lot of stuff that's within the grasp. If you just, like any other big problem, right? Don't try to be overwhelmed by it. Do some concrete steps that you can do, and if you do nothing else, at least you've done something. And I think from an insurance standpoint, that's one of the things I think people don't realize that insurance companies do as well as we do, right? Which is to say, we provide our customers access to risk management services and best practices, and have partners that they can contact before they have an event, right? We're there when you have a claim, but we're there before you have a claim, and we want to work with you to make sure that you put in place the measures to help reduce the chances that you're going to be a victim.
Well, that's awesome, and I it kind of boggles my mind that if it's not an issue whereby the organization doesn't really know how to approach cybersecurity effectively, I don't know if it's just because they just kind of feel like they are in bulletproof, if you will, that it's never going to happen to them, or it's never going to happen to them again because it's happened once, or if they're just kind of lazy about it. But I think awareness is always a very good first step. But how many organizations actually act on it beyond that, I think, is very telling about our state of cybersecurity, and how they I don't know. It's almost like a lot of other things where you always think that it's not going to happen to you until it does. And that's when you realize I should have gotten insurance, or I should have done this, or I should have done that. So, do you think it's going to take some major event, like, cybersecurity issues become personal to the company or to the individual before, we start to see real change happen?
Maybe I'm biased, right? This is what I do every day. So I would say these events, is it going to take a major event? Geez, it seems like we have a major event that ought to move the envelope, every other day, it seems like, right? Or at least frequently. And yet it doesn't quite get us over that hump, I think, in terms of institutional awareness, I guess. But, to your point though, right? When we have a customer that has an event, they get religion pretty quick in terms of making, saying, not wanting that to happen to them again, right? Yeah. And those are customers that that have an event, and we're there to guide them through it, right? Not just financially, but we're there with our experts and partners to make that situation go as well as it could go. And despite doing that, and despite it going as well as it could go, it's never fun. It's always filled with anxiety. It can be detrimental to your business, and particularly in ransomware, right? You may have insurance, and you may even pay the ransom and get your system back online, but that takes potentially days or weeks where you're offline, right? And you're a small, medium-sized business. You don't have days or weeks to be offline, and so the consequences are extreme. I think slowly but surely, as I said before, if it's not happening to you, it's happened to somebody right? Somebody in your neighborhood, somebody in your business sector, and I think that's driving a lot of people to realize I need not only the security in place, but just in case something still happens, I need insurance. But it's still creeping up, whereas the cyber threat is running at us very quickly.
Well, I certainly hope that that awareness is going to spur people to move faster with their cybersecurity controls and making sure that they do have the right technologies and tools in place to be able to effectively fight off cyber attacks. So, kind of circling back to the report, were there any things, any single thing, or maybe multiple things that changed this year that really kind of took you by surprise, in comparison to years past?
The thing that did strike me is I thought it was in years past where when we asked the question, have you had these events? It was single or low double digits. To jump all the way to 25%, identifying that they've had an event of some consequence, right? That ranges from really bad to maybe not so bad. That's striking. And then I can't help but go back to that's happening. That's real. That's not headlines, right? That's just real everyday businesses having these events take place, and yet still somewhat saying, yeah, but I haven't done everything I know I could do, and maybe I don't even know everything I can do. And yeah, we'll get there, but I think people still don't fully appreciate when these events get really bad, how bad they can get. It's not uncommon for these to be multi-million-dollar events for companies that may make I'll say as an example, we've had situations where our customers have had ransom demands in excess of their total gross annual revenue. That's not a situation that you can really afford to deal with on your own. You just can't. And so that's if nothing else, the value and the importance of having insurance as the backup.
Yeah. Okay. So looking ahead then, based on, since you guys have been doing this index for quite a while now, I imagine you guys have seen some trends kind of play out over the few years, and especially with respect for cybersecurity. What are you guys kind of thinking is on the horizon for next year, based on what you've been seeing over the last couple of years? And do you think that overall things are going to get better in the next year, maybe as we see even greater awareness from organizations?
I think year over year things have gotten better. It's not all doom and gloom. I certainly think that things should be they should be getting faster than they are, but there is a slow and steady march towards better practices, and that's true. And I think that's a very positive thing. I just would say I wish it weren't slow and steady, because as we said, the claims that we've seen have increased in frequency and increased in severity in terms of total cost at an even faster pace. And so I think while we're making steady progress, I'm not sure it's keeping a pace of the threat. And I think you're going to see from insurers like us, really make sure that our customers are doing the right things. And so things like multi-factor authentication, as an example, right? No longer having that as a best practice, having that as something that's mandatory. And if we have customers that say, and we have customers that are small, medium, and large, and some of our customers, sole proprietorships, 2 or 3 employees, doing, working every day to pay their employees and service their customers, often don't even know what a multi-factor authentication is, right? And let alone how to put it on your system. We have the resources to help them. We can partner them with companies that will do things like that at a relatively nominal cost. Again, some of this is not even at any cost. So we're there to partner with our customers, but things that maybe were nice to have or should have are going to become more and more mandatory. And so whether you're a buyer of insurance or not, be aware and pay attention to those trends, because they're real and they're not there by accident.
Yeah. Good points. And I do believe that a lot of the requirements that the insurance industry is going to implement, I think that is actually going to have a positive impact on the cybersecurity footprint of organizations at writ large, not just those who are looking to get cyber insurance, because it's also kind of a supply chain thing, right? So if you've got a customer who is who works with another customer, and then, that customer works with another, all these different vendors, they all have to be somewhat secure, well, not somewhat, but secure along the lines to make sure that, that your customer is secure. So it almost seems like a butterfly effect, if you will. So, hopefully that will have a major positive impact on cybersecurity.
Yeah, and I think that's right, and I think it's a good point. And I would just add to that, we as an industry and certainly Travelers as a company are working very closely with government, and whether it be through CISA or with folks at NIST to make sure that our standards, where appropriate, line up with their standards and vice versa. And we're in conversation with those organizations to think about what are the right standards based on, what we're seeing in our claims environment, helping inform those standards for everyone, whether you buy insurance or not, and making sure that we have some uniformity and some consistency and sharing of information where that's appropriate to try to get towards the true, real best practices that can do the best to prevent these things from taking place. So I think we're going to see even more out of that public-private partnership in terms of creating standards and having those standards actually implemented, as opposed to just being out there as some best practices that maybe you look at a website once in a while. That won't be the case, for long anyway.
Yeah. Good point. Well, good stuff all the way around. If folks want to take a look at the index, is it available on the Travelers site?
I believe that we can make a highlights of it available, and we'll make sure that your folks get a link to where they can see that.
All right. Awesome. Well, Tim, thanks so much for having the conversation with me. As always, a pleasure talking to you.
Very much. Thank you so much for having me back, and look forward to it anytime.
All right. Great. All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more Techstrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond, CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Techstrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Jimmy Fong, who is the Chief Commercial Officer at a company called Seon. Jimmy, thank you so much for being on the Zoom with me today. Really do appreciate it.
Yeah, pleasure to be speaking, Charlene. Happy to have this connection.
Yes, me too. Tell me a little bit about Seon. I'm not familiar with your company.
Yeah, sure. So we're a relatively young startup, just come up for 4 years old. We are Series A funded back earlier this year, and we originate out of Europe, so kind of twinned between Budapest, Hungary, and also London, where I sit in the UK. But we're excited. We have offices open in Austin, Texas, and then over in Jakarta, APAC region as well there. And what we focus in on doing is we provide microservices for the kind of online business community in terms of fraud detection. So we do kind of two things really. One end, we provide what's known as data enrichment over a data point, like an email address or phone number, and we purport back on what we call a social footprint of that data point. So we're looking if Charlene, you're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, etc. And then the other side of what we do is we provide an end-to-end risk platform for online business that needs to automate a accept or reject decision there.
Well, very, very cool. And I imagine that your service is well in demand with the rise of these alternative payment methods that have come up. Services like Klarna and Afterpay and God, what's the other one? Affirm, I think it is, and there are other services out there as well. A lot of retailers have kind of added those services to their sites, their online sites, and being as we are coming upon the holiday season, there's got to be that potential for consumer or not even consumer fraud, but just fraud in general. And so I'm interested in finding out what you guys are seeing in the space right now, and really how these alternative payment methods actually are kind of, I don't want to say a catalyst, but how they can actually kind of foment fraud within the online retail space.
Yeah, a couple of names you mentioned are they are indeed customers of our technology there. So they are, and I think kind of the big trend we're seeing kind of pre-pandemic, sadly, online fraud levels were always rising, and then events like the pandemic just acted as like a big accelerant to it. And mainly because, I think it comes down to fraudsters are very aware that so many businesses were kind of forced online digitally than they were ready for. And then you've got this phenomenon, as you rightly mentioned, around retailers also trying to make the buying experience so simple that before you know it, you've made the purchase and you're good to go. So hence being able to automate the split up into 12 payments, interest free, very easy to do. And so I think we've always seen like a balance. So retailers are trying to make this super simple with these buy now, pay later companies. And then on the flip side of it is simplicity sometimes leads to, fraudsters being aware of this and taking advantage of that as well. And so it's always a balance between applying a bit of friction for security purposes, but then not actually leading to marketing churn, right? Or checkout churn in that sense. So it's a constant kind of balance there. You mentioned kind of like what we've seen also in the pandemic. So buy now, pay later, we're all completely aware it's kind of really blown up in the last 18 months. Some fantastic kind of fintech growth stories, not just the traditional ones you mentioned there, but lots of like regional niche players as well, all around the world. And I think what we've seen there is like a growth of people taking over identities with account takeover fraud. And so technology like ours, I think it's come at a time where what these merchants are wanting is they're asking so little to be able to allow a smooth, seamless kind of credit process for that customer. But at the same time, they're lacking traditional data points to be able to make like a secure transaction as well. And so any technology that's around where it doesn't impose on the consumer to do extra stuff, basically, is like a good thing, because you're kind of playing into that magical transaction experience where you're just not inconveniencing the end consumer.
Right. Yeah. And I got to tell you, I've seen those, pay $9 a month with, Afterpay or something like that, and I'm like, yeah, you're right. I mean, they're just kind of exploded on the scene over the last, I would say, year and a half or so. Maybe at the beginning of the pandemic, I started to see them here and there, but it just like over the last year, definitely seeing a lot more of those services. So, how different are these from, say, credit card transactions where you've got the ability to pay by a credit card and then, obviously break those, the cost into multiple payments. So, what is different about these alternative payment methods that make it a completely different kind of threat vector?
Yeah. So I think mechanically it's the same concept for sure, but these are fintech. And so the extra data that these buy now, pay later companies are being able to process is their asset. And kind of how they're looking at it is they're looking at essentially alternative forms of data to make a better credit risk decision. So for us, the two kind of threat vectors that come in play are just when someone signs up for the service. So what's known as on registration. So typically when you sign up for that, you see that advert for, split it out to, 12 $9 payments. It's very alluring. And the other thing to mention about this to also say is the other reason behind why these are kind of blowing up is it's tapping into the zeitgeist of Gen Z kind of behavior as well. It's allowing folk to keep on consuming and be able to afford certain lifestyle items without kind of inconveniencing them by having to pay up front. So they're enabling in that sense. And I would say that's the first attack vector is around sign up. And again, it's back to that concept that it only works if it's so easy for that person to 1 click, 2 clicks, and very short form fill on the information there. That's the first thing. So behind the scenes, what are the BNPL companies looking at? Ideally, they're asking for the least amount of information, but they're definitely enriching that data. So that's kind of where, for our startup, it's really helped because we're typically focused in on literally an email address. We're purporting back on a ton more data points around, actually this Charlene O'Hanlon at gmail.com is on Facebook, or is on LinkedIn, is on Insta. And that's what most people look like in 2021, especially Gen Z. It's very social. It's very, it's a good modern proxy for somebody existing as a digital footprint. The flip side of that is fraudsters and multi-accounters and people taking advantage of these BNPL kind of technologies. It's easy to create a temporary email address, but it's not so easy to recreate a digital footprint. So it's technically possible, of course. So we're operating in that kind of technology space, but it's not economically feasible typically for like criminal organized groups to do so en masse. So that's the first attack vector, is what's known as registration risk. The second one, which is more interesting, and going back to your question, hey, how are these different systemically from, say, the card industries that have been around, 40, 50 odd years? The difference here is that to make the BNPL companies work and succeed, they're looking at alternative forms of data. And what they're doing with the alternative forms of data is trying to build a good credit risk decision off those so that they can see that there's some positive correlation to that Charlene is a good customer for that BNPL company. She's more likely to repay. And those alternative forms of data are along the same vein. They're looking at things like our social checks. So a silly example we always talk about is, and we have many BNPL companies look at things like, this person has a GitHub account. Now that may kind of lightly suggest they are an engineer in that space, and thus they may have a bit more disposable income, to use a silly example there. So that's kind of why they're different. They're able to leverage tech much better than I would say the kind of classic credit card industry.
Okay. All right. Great. So, from a developer point of view, especially developers working at online retail companies, are there certain things that they need to consider when they're looking to integrate some of these buy now, pay later technologies into their sites to kind of lock them down and make them more secure and, not even more user friendly, but just secure overall?
Yeah, I guess no surprise. I think looking at tech stacks that are API driven, so it's all backend to backend comms, is like kind of just critical. The other side from it as well is because you have online security technologies, and we can talk about a bunch of them, right? You've got your CAPTCHAs, which have been around for a while, but they're just frustrating to the end consumer, right? But they do stop bots, so that's kind of the primary purpose of it. But it's frustrating. You've got things like device fingerprint technology, which is able to, it's able to invisibly say, hey, this is the same iPhone X we've seen before, or iPad or something like that. And then you've got kind of stacks like ourselves where it's all about, we give you much more information about that interaction, and then you're able to make a kind of a much better decision off it because, we're able to tell you, kind of essentially a lot more about that instance and interaction. By default, APIs should be seamless, should be invisible, shouldn't really ideally be asking anything of that consumer. It should just sit invisibly behind the scenes. So I'd say developers, kind of are spoiled by kind of payment services like Stripe, which have done an incredible job. And in the same way, what we're trying to do as a startup is build out like that. So it's all publicly exposed API references. You can check it out, 24/7. No need to sign up. No need to speak to a human. It's all just out there, just like Stripe's documentation. And then secondly, it's all testable. So more importantly, for that developer that's working on that project at 2 a.m. wherever they are in the world, there is no live interaction needed. They can just go test the tech and they're able to run with it. Very cool.
Very cool. So since we are coming upon the holidays, from a consumer perspective, are there any things in particular that they need to kind of keep in mind to avoid becoming a victim of identity theft as the result of these kind of buy now, pay later applications or technologies? Or, are there different considerations from a security perspective when shopping online and using these alternative payment methods?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the key, right? Is their success is they're so easy to use and so so convenient, right? So I think it's basic hygiene, at least from a consumer point of view. On passwords and accounts created have to be individual and unique instead of reuse. I think that's a classic one we see from consumers that are reusing the password, and then potentially, if that organization hasn't been the most careful, there's a good chance that a data breach might be affected. And that's okay as long as you're able to change that password, but it's a big problem if you're kind of using the same online password across sites, right? And that's what hackers kind of understand and tap into, is the human element of being a little bit mentally lazy, shall we say. So definitely tip number one is kind of making sure as you're signing up for these services, which are really good. They make shopping easy, seamless. But the flip side is making sure you're maintaining good password hygiene with unique, strong passwords for each of these buy now, pay later services.
Awesome. Well, it's going to be an interesting holiday season on a number of levels. And I think supply chain shortages certainly are going to factor well into the holiday season and people's gift buying decisions. So, and I think we're going to hear a lot more about cyber threats and fraud and all of the bad parts of the holiday season and shopping online. So I think, I think we'll have lots to talk about in the months to come regarding this holiday season. But it's good to hear that you guys are kind of helping lead the charge to make sure that consumers are protected. So thanks very much, and thanks for coming on Techstrong TV. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Charlene. Great speaking to you.
Thanks. All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more Techstrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Techstrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Jeremy Ventura, who is a senior security strategist over at Mimecast. Jeremy, thanks so much for being on the Zoom with me for Techstrong TV. I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me, Charlene.
You bet. You bet. So tell me a little bit about Mimecast. I know the company well, but not everybody in the audience might be familiar with your company. So give us a little bit of background.
Absolutely. So Mimecast has been around since 2003. We actually went public in 2015, so a publicly traded company. But Mimecast is the leader in email security, archiving, and continuity. So when we think about email, we think about typical things like phishing and spam and malware and malicious URLs. So we provide a platform that really is focused around cyber resilience. So making sure that organizations are secure before, during, and after an incident happens. So we're looking at emails, we're securing those emails, protecting organizations from things like DLP or organizations sending out social security cards when they shouldn't be. But also we provide other services around archiving. So making sure that legal teams and e-discovery and compliance have a system of record, have a platform of record, in addition to continuity services. So making sure, just in case there was ever an outage with your email provider, that Mimecast would be able to back up and be able to continue working so the business continues moving and the organization continues sending email. And additionally, we've also expanded the platform into things I like to call it around visibility. So making sure organizations have visibility when it comes to different things like impersonation attacks and spoofing, and making sure that their brand protection is secure at all times.
That's awesome. You guys have a great suite of security products that I know are very relevant these days, especially, we keep hearing so much about all of the cyber attacks that have been happening, especially during the pandemic, the increase in ransomware. I think cyber attacks are up something like 800% or something along those lines. It's an amazing number, and it's downright terrifying, I think, if you actually kind of sit down and think about it, which I try not to do too much. But that said, it's definitely something that is top of mind for a lot of our audience members. So I want to talk to you a little bit about social engineering and the cyber attacks that are coming as part of that. And we both know that social engineering is not a new thing for a lot of cyber threats, and still it doesn't seem to be one that we still have we have gained a handle on. And so I'm interested in finding out from you what you guys are seeing in relation to social engineering attacks, and give me some good news here. Are we getting any better with this, or are you going to ruin my day? I
might ruin your day. No, I'm just kidding. I definitely think when I look back at the last 2 years, obviously the entire world went through a pandemic, and that caused the huge rise of just social engineering attacks, impersonation attacks, not just via email, but just in general. And I think when we looked at that, hackers got smarter. They took control. They took advantage of the fear that individuals had, whether it was around getting the vaccine, or maybe somebody in the office caught COVID, or maybe now it's getting your booster shot. What we've seen is this pattern of attackers leveraging kind of the news that's going on in the real world, and then using that to exfiltrate or using that to attack organizations. And when we think about social engineering, to your point, Charlene, it's nothing really new. But I think what's happened is the tactics and techniques that attackers are using are evolving. They're getting smarter. They're using technology that the good guys that we protect companies, they're using technology that we use on an everyday basis. And when we look at some of the different tactics and techniques and how they've evolved, for example, I was talking to a customer just last week, and this one had to happen with a brand impersonation. So it was a bank, and this bank had a fake domain that was created upon them. And so they took their name, and what they did is they have an A in their name. And so it's first letter A. They took that A, the attackers did, and used a different, what we call internationalized domain name. So a different character set. They used a Latin character, changed the A into the Latin A, maybe has a little squiggly line at the top.
Yep.
Created the website, and it looked exactly like the actual website. But for you and I, and for the normal individual, we're not going to see that, especially in the world we live in, where we're moving so fast. We're on our cell phones. We're going in and out of offices. We're going to other locations. We're moving at light speeds nowadays, where how we conduct business and work. And I think based upon that pattern, based upon the behaviors of normal humans in the everyday world today, attackers are able to take advantage of that and do things like maybe create the fake A, or do a type of squatting in a domain, and then trick the user into clicking or entering credentials or entering their bank account information. So it's become a real problem. We've definitely seen the high rise during the pandemic, and even coming out of the pandemic, it's still very predominant of how much social engineering attacks are actually happening to organizations and employees.
So do you think, though, because of the market increase, there is a greater awareness now among the general public regarding these types of attacks? Because I don't think that I've ever seen another time when cybersecurity has dominated the headlines, mainstream headlines, in the way that it has over the last year. And I'm sure a lot of that has to do with the ransomware, the critical infrastructure attacks, things of that nature. But it seems to have raised the collective awareness around cybersecurity. And I wonder if, do you think that in turn will kind of help us as we move forward in kind of thwarting these attacks, or just recognizing when something just doesn't seem right?
Absolutely. So I 100% agree with you. I never would like to say any cybersecurity attack is good, because it's not. But when we look at some of the pros out of that, exactly to your point, we have a now heightened awareness of cybersecurity. I've got family and friends that will call me, and if there was a cyber incident that was happening, they would call and be like, should I go get gas right now? I'm like, don't panic, relax. And so we see, and I think we can all as cybersecurity professionals see that even just in our normal lives, where our friends, our family, individuals, other coworkers, employees are starting to get this heightened awareness about what's going on in the world. And I think there's some positive to this. I know we always in cybersecurity typically talk about the breaches and ransomware and attacks. And I think sometimes we need to look at the positive of what's happening out of this. And we see on an everyday basis where even the customers that we talk to, there's more of not just an awareness, but more of an appreciation, I think, for what we do in cybersecurity, but also a heightened alert that maybe I shouldn't click on that link. It looks a little suspicious. Maybe I should report it this time, or maybe I shouldn't download this attachment because do I really know who this is coming from? So I think we are doing better as an industry. Unfortunately, had to take major cybersecurity incidents that had to make the global headline news, but I think we are getting better as far as that awareness goes.
So yeah, we're more aware. But then the next question is, what are we doing about it? Because I know people who are very, very smart people who are reusing their passwords on multiple sites. They're not that difficult to crack. And if I point it out to them, they're like, it's all right. I'm good. You know, I haven't been breached yet that they know of. And, you know, sometimes it's hard to break these habits of old where, you know, you've got a password that you love and you just keep using it over and over again. And you pretty much feel like you are, you know, you're impermeable. The rules do not apply, I guess. So how do you get folks to kind of change their behavior, change their ways, and you know, really do practice what they're now being made aware of?
Absolutely. It's difficult, right? Because at the end of the day, we're humans. But I think when I think about it, if I could coin it, we got to get all employees from the maintenance people that work late hours all the way to the C-level executive and everybody in between. We need to get everybody to buy into security. Right. Everyone needs to feel like they're part of the security or the risk to that organization, whether it's email or not, whether for example, whether it is the maintenance director that's working late night shift and cleaning the office when everyone's went home. Maybe you don't let that, you know, maybe you close the door or you lock the door. So it's cybersecurity, it's physical security, but in general, it's security. And I think everybody needs to feel part of the security of that organization. And there's a couple of different things. I think as organizations, as security department heads within companies, we also have a responsibility to make sure that when we are performing, whether it might be phishing simulations or security awareness testing for our employees, we make sure that it's fun. We make sure that it's interactive. Nobody likes to take that once a year cybersecurity training and nobody does it. They just kind of click, 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 right? We need to make it a little bit more frequent, a little bit more relevant, but fun as well. I always recommend if organizations can add a little bit of gamification. People like to play games or maybe do prizes at the end of it. So if you complete your security awareness training and you answer these questions right, the first 100 people are going to get a company sweatshirt. Let's example. You get people kind of bought into that, right? So thinking outside the box, thinking creatively is also the responsibility for us. It's a responsibility for the security team to make sure that people are buying in to the program.
Do you think that people are still kind of the mindset that security isn't their responsibility, that, you know, the company spends a whole lot of money on cybersecurity, ergo, I shouldn't have to worry about it? And I think that this is a real problem with a lot of organizations, is people just don't want to take the responsibility for their own security because they feel like, you know, there's a whole security department, so they shouldn't have to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it goes back to the original question where it's a little bit of awareness as well, where sometimes we see this not just with just the normal employee, but even other departments that security teams work with, where we look at security almost as an afterthought. The business is going forward. We're going to move. We've got to, you know, stay online. We've got to get customers and prospects. and security is kind of in the background. Security is almost a nuisance or an annoyance to some departments and some individuals. To your point, Charlene, we hear it from sometimes where people will click on the bad link and was like, well, it should be on the company to protect me. Like, I should be able to make those mistakes. And so I think we need to find the balance where, once again, security is doing their part to get people to buy in, but we're also maybe awarding people when they do something right. And I think so many times we see in the industry where we do, I'm just picking phishing simulations. We send out phishing simulations, somebody clicks it bad, and they're on a naughty list. Instead of just being on the naughty list and, you know, having your manager contact you and yell at you, we need to stop that. It needs to be a little bit more positive reinforcement. Let's go through the training. Let's talk about that attack and why it was there, or why we targeted you specifically. So hopefully that answers the question, but it's a little bit of both, right? It's on both sides of the spectrum where maybe the employee doesn't feel like their responsibility, but that's our job to make sure that they're feeling responsible.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense, and certainly, you know, giving them the carrot instead of the stick is a great way to get somebody to do something that you know, maybe they don't want to do otherwise, but helping them understand exactly why this is important, not only for the company, but for themselves as well, I think is a good step as well for organizations to do. So do you think that do you ever see a time when we're actually going to be, then things are going to get better and we're not going to have to worry so much about these social engineering attacks? Or do you think that, as technologically advanced as we get, the attackers are going to be just that much more advanced technologically, and they're always going to be one step ahead of us?
Yeah, I think there's I keep saying the word responsibility, but there's definitely a responsibility from the government agencies that we live in, with U.S. government, UK governments all around the world, but also in coalition with the private sector as well. So the businesses and operations. The better we can be at information sharing, threat intelligence sharing, the better we're all going to be as a company or as a world. And I think in the short term, we'll see still the social engineering continue to rise because, once again, it's playing off things. It's playing off the human behavior. It's playing off fear. I was just talking to another friend of mine last week, and we were talking about Halloween. And Halloween was coming up, and I'm not sure if anyone saw it, but there was one of the world's largest manufacturer of candy corn was hit with a ransomware attack. And so a lot of people didn't. I
shouldn't laugh. That's awful.
A lot of people didn't see this in the news. But
especially those people who don't like candy corn, they're like, yes. No.
I know. But we see this in the news time and time where they're going after organizations or going after employees during maybe times of vacation or holidays. So we're seeing this pattern behavior, and they're using a lot of social engineering attacks that we talked about. So do I think we'll get better? One can only be hopeful. I think as we progress, as we have more sanctions, as we have more restrictions. I was just talking to another individual last week in San Diego at a healthcare conference, and we were talking about the whole, which could be a whole nother session. We were talking about IoT devices, like smart devices and medical sensors. Yeah. And where does it come into play where those manufacturers need to include security in their products? The problem is they don't. Right, we create a device, it goes out to the consumer or the hospital, or the individual, and we use that. But there's no security behind that. So I think as we look at the risk, as we look into different types of devices and assets and where the threat is always coming from, we need to always be flexible, but we need to be thinking ahead as well, because we know that that's what the attackers are doing.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I want to say, like, the IEEE is actually looking into standards for IoT security, but I could be wrong on the organization. But I have heard some rumblings that organizations who are that are producing IoT devices they're looking deeper at their security. But what really was the Wild West for a long time, right? But these manufacturers would just put out these IoT devices without any security because they didn't have to. I mean, it wasn't part of their part of their manufacturing process, and nobody sat there and told them that they needed to include security. So as a result, we've got an entire population of IoT devices out there that are not secure, and that's, to your point, that's a whole other topic for For another time, for sure, Jeremy.
Absolutely.
But for this one, thanks for having the conversation with me. I got to tell you, I'm a bit of a pessimist when it comes to cybersecurity because I keep hearing the same things over and over again, and we're really not seeing a whole lot changing. But I am hopeful that, especially with the cybersecurity executive orders that have been coming out of the White House and the federal government, really kind of knuckling down on cybersecurity and raising the profile again. I think we'll start to see some real change and more collaboration between companies and even countries. And so we'll see what 2022 brings. But Jeremy, thank you again for having the conversation with me today. I do appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Charlene, for having me.
You bet. All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more Techstrong TV coming up, so stay tuned. Hey, everybody. Happy Monday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the webinars preview. As I always tell you, we have so many great webinars coming up on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. Here are some that are coming up this week in the hopes that you can mark your calendar and join us. All right, the first one is called Getting Started with Open Telemetry, Observability Best Practices. This is happening Tuesday, December 7th, that's tomorrow, at 3 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. This one is sponsored by Splunk. This session focuses on open telemetry, who's behind it, what it actually contains, and the immediate benefits for Splunk customers and anyone who builds and manages production services. So attendees will hear an overview of the open telemetry OTel collector architecture, the benefits of OTel for increasing visibility in your applications, how Splunk is supporting and integrating with open telemetry, and finally, how to build an open telemetry pipeline. Well, it's going to be really interesting. The second one is called AWS Container Live Hack, Managing Container Vulnerabilities in Amazon ECR and Amazon EKS. This one is happening Wednesday, December 8th at 3 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. This one is sponsored by Sneak. In this live hacking session, we'll exploit an application as an attacker would to showcase some of the most common container vulnerabilities and misconfigurations and how they expose your container application to a malicious actor. We'll then show you some clear remediation actions and best practices for each attack scenario. We'll also demonstrate how you can protect your application by automatically detecting container image vulnerabilities in registries like Amazon ECR and monitor Amazon EKS clusters for new vulnerabilities after deployment. Another really good one there. All right, the third one is called SCA, Your First Step Towards Supply Chain Security. This one is happening Thursday, December 9th at 11 a.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard. This one is sponsored by WhiteSource. Over the past year, breaches like SolarWinds and Kaseya have made it impossible to ignore the threat of software supply chain attacks. Protecting the software supply chain is a complex challenge that includes code signing, identity and access management, policy, and software composition analysis, also known as SCA. This webinar focuses on why SCA is crucial to achieving supply chain security and why the increased threat of malicious packages has meant a shift from the traditional scan and report SCA approach to a prevent and defend supply chain security strategy. Another good one. All right, that's it for the webinar's preview. Please check back with me tomorrow. I'll have a fresh new batch. Until then, I hope everybody has a great day, and please, whatever you do, stay safe. All right, welcome back. Next up, we've got the Analyst Corner segment with Mitch Ashley. He's got two conversations today. In this first one, he speaks with Lance Knight, who is the COO and president at ConnectAll, and they talk about the new Value Stream Designer, which is a new and free tool that is used to visually map out the software value stream. Great stuff there. After that, Mitch speaks with Sam Backen, who is the Director of Product Marketing at OneSpan. They discuss super apps, and the emergence of them from the mobile perspective is bringing together a new threat landscape and security posture. So they discuss mobile security, how attackers may look to exploit users, and how super apps can offer opportunities for banks and organizations to build upon their trusted reputation with customers. Great conversation, both of them. Let's go ahead and get to them now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
I have the pleasure of being joined by Lance Knight. Lance is COO and president of ConnectAll. Lance, good to be talking to you.
It's great to talk to everybody here again, and it's great to meet you as well.
Nice to meet you. I know you've had a lot of conversations with Alan, and a great opportunity for me to have a conversation with you too. Awesome. For folks that might not know you or have seen you before, tell us about yourself and, of course, ConnectAll. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I hardly ever done that before, told anybody about myself. But anyway, I'm Lance Knight. I'm president and CEO of ConnectAll. And, we've been around ConnectAll for a while. We've been spearheading and maybe in the forefront of this value stream management market. And we're excited to be a part of this fun ride that's, value stream management. It's been an interesting ride for me for years. I've been in this space since even before it was value stream management. For years now, and I'm just excited to see it grow and excited to be a part of DevOps.com. And we recently got nominated. It's part of the 12 for value stream management solutions. So appreciate that. Mm-hmm. As for myself, more about myself, I've got a wife, a kid. I got 3 kids. I'm just kidding now, but lots of cool things happening in our industry right now.
It's fascinating. I think one of the things that is fascinating about value stream management is it's emerging, but it's been around for a long time. It's not like it's new. I mean, it's in the manufacturing, and you go back to the goal and all, a lot of other things in Toyota. So it isn't a new concept, but it is as we apply it to software. What do you think now's the time for value stream management? I'm really curious. You obviously are made a big decision of you're CEO of this company, and that's what you're focused on. Why is now the time we are going to be able to make this happen?
Well, first, you're so right. And I've said this quite a bit is, I started my career in manufacturing, doing value stream management work, understanding lean, systems thinking, all of those things to improve how manufacturing happened. Mm-hmm. And what I think is now, as you take a look at what happened with Agile, what's going on with DevOps, and the way that we were looking at how they're developing software, they're thinking, how do I make this even better? And I have a whole bunch of opinions why now. One of those is maybe a little controversial, is the goals, aims, and means, and the great vision of what an agile transformation was supposed to do with my organization was never truly achieved.
You mean it got overhyped and oversold?
Overhyped, oversold. It only really talked about how developers to work better. It never, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I totally know.
And I've spent, on my organization, we spent millions of dollars on these coaches and transformational people. And now you want me to do that with DevOps too. Mm-hmm. And build a community and feel good about it and sing Kumbaya. But from
didn't Lean solve that for us? Didn't Agile solve that for us too before that? And, the success.
Yeah, right?
It's an evolution, right?
And, I see a little of that bleeding into value stream management. But I think why VSM right now? Because it makes you look at your end-to-end flow. It makes you understand how you're deciding what to do. It makes you look at how code goes through things. It's a little more logical. Mm-hmm. Not that those other ones aren't, but it's more specific. It's got an age-old set of things. And business people, the ones that make decisions on things, can wrap their head around it. Right? All right. So somebody puts a request in here. It goes here. It goes through our agile processes. What do you mean? I can finally get these reports to tell me how efficient my teams are. Mm-hmm. I think that's what's driving a lot of it. And Connect All, we call it see, measure, automate, right? I can see my value stream now, I can measure, and I can automate it. And I think that's just one reason why it's taking off. And I think there's some other ones, it's like, well, we do Agile, DevOps, value stream, what are we doing? And how does this relate? And at Connect All, we say this all the time, so it's really interesting. Value stream management is a human thing. It's a human endeavor. We talked earlier about it's been around forever with manufacturing. We didn't have machines and computers out there managing our value stream. We went and did that. We improved the flow. We looked at how parts moved around the shop floor. We mapped it, and we had some tools to help us. And a value stream management platform, that's what they're there to do, help humans be more effective at managing requests to code in production, connecting it, and automating the processes within it.
There's this phrase I heard, I don't know where from, you want to work on the business, not just in the business. In other words, you have to that's about continuous improvement, whatever that might be. But you have to understand it first. You have to be able to measure first. Okay, where do we go improve? And that thing I want to run by you is I think one of the reasons why value stream management gets a lot of attention is we've elevated the value, the strategy behind software, and how much that is the importance of that to businesses, how much they're counting on our ability to deliver. But, gone are the 1 year, 90-day, whatever projects where, we think we're going to get this spec, but we never do, and something else pops out. Now we're doing lots of little smaller releases. How does the business know if I put a quarter in here, I'm going to get my quarter's worth of what I thought I was going to get there? And now we can manage that process to help achieve those results. Is that fair, you think?
That's fair too. And I think that's another reason why it's taking off right now, right? My controversial point, but then there's this other point of, I'm an executive, I'm an organization. I've never seen what I've had move quick enough, move through. And what are the bottleneckers? How's it? It's invisible to me, right? I have an initiative and I know I need these capabilities. I need this software. I need all these things. And as I'm saying that, I'm watching just this initiative that's artifact in some system. I don't know if that's moving forward. I don't know if I'm blocked. It's a black box to me. And value stream management kind of opens some of that up as you try to look at flow. And then also, like you said earlier, how am I prioritizing that? I've got technical debt. That's really important to repair. But how do I prioritize that rather than somebody saying, I need to fix this technical debt? Where you could look at it and say, not yet. This is more important than that. This new capability to make me competitive in the market is more important than if I fix that technical debt today. Those decisions aren't able to be made at the right levels. And it's also strategy execution, right? Where I can go and design my outcomes I want, my initiatives, and then have those get executed across all the organizations because we have all this visibility and trackability. So that's the C part, and also the measure part, right? You talked about measuring, right? I can say, all right, now I've improved our processes by 25%. So now I can move quicker. The only thing that I think value stream management we have to be careful of is and I'm seeing some of the other analyst firms do this. It's not DevOps value stream management. It's value stream management. And DevOps things are a part of that value stream.
We have a value stream whether you're doing DevOps or not, right?
At Connect All, my head of products says, there's a value stream now. Every company has them. You may not be aware that is a value stream, but it is.
I think it's just been more elevated to our consciousness, right? Because of DevOps.
It isn't more aware of the flow of value through it, right? So it's interesting as it takes off and goes to the next stages of it and so on. I just want to make sure it stays the highest level thing from an organization perspective. And that's your value stream, right? You have DevOps tools, of course, and those are part of your value stream also. I just did a speaking slot somewhere about value stream management is not a feature. And I went into that whole thing about how value stream management isn't a feature of a tool. or another tool. It is what you do, and the tools and the platforms help you be more efficient.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a different take, I think, than a lot of organizations have on it, as they try to figure out how to build the best value stream feature in their product. So Connect.all, we have a value stream management platform. It lets you see, measure, and automate. But if you're not educated on systems thinking, lean principles, we could do some little stuff, but you really have to map it, use area of waste principles, lean principles to think it through, right? I've got some Muda, right? If I've used the word right, maybe we'll get some text about he said that wrong, which I probably did. But anyway, that's waste. And then you can go figure out how to fix that. Why am I having these things? So yeah, I mean, it's really, I think it's going to take off pretty well, and organizations need to do this now because software is no longer that thing that guy in the corner called Lance programs so that you're more efficient in some of the manufacturing stuff you do.
It reminds me of when Al, Jim, and I first worked together in security. Security was evolving from sort of the people nobody knew that did this thing behind the scenes and couldn't talk to them because they didn't know what it was about, to more everyday people, system administrators, network administrators. And so you had to really think about the barrier to entry, right? Do you have to be a lean expert to do value stream management, or can you step your way into it? So there's a whole idea of barrier to entry for your products, and how do you make that lower to get people started? And I know you've had an announcement, I think, related to that recently for Connect.all. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So first, you don't need to be a lean expert to do it. Just have to maybe read a little white paper, on it, and understand just the basics of it, and it'll help you through. So what we have done, if you're referencing to the fact that, and one of the reasons why we want to do this is that Connect.all is going to offer a free online value stream management visualizer designer where you can log in, put all your tools on there, draw the boxes of flow, decide what kind of flow loops you want, and just lay out your whole value stream. That's actually, yes, that's what we have. That's our big announcement coming next week, is the free online value stream design. And it's a nice little drag and drop environment where I can just drag on my tools. It's going to have all the different tools on there, and then I can draw lines between them. I can set up my swim lanes, my boxes. We can do all kinds of things in order for you to lay out your value stream. You can name the links. You can name it so it's personalized. You can put notes in there. And then I'll give you a PDF view of your value stream that you can export. You can go around and share that with your manager. So here's how our workflow works. And it comes from the years that I've been doing value stream management workshops on a big whiteboard. But we're not getting together these days for these whiteboard sessions. So, I can it's got these different palettes, and you can, do all these things so that you can actually get a good vision to see your value stream and how things are flowing. And we'll be happy to help you lay that out. If you wanted to get on with a session with one of our solution architects to walk you through it, you can save them because it may be a multi-session thing. Export them and share them with other people that can load it into the free value stream from their computer. And I'm really excited about it because I think it'll really help people understand how they can use just this one part of value stream management to help. So, Connect.all, we're all about helping the humans be more effective at this, right? And it's just a great opportunity for anybody who's interested in getting involved in value stream management to have a place where they can go just lay it out. It's pretty robust. Does some cool things. Yesterday I was messing with it. I drew a turkey in it. So, Thanksgiving's coming. So we drew this little turkey in there, right? Somebody will probably do a Christmas tree on it as well. But the cool thing is And I know some people will probably like, well, I can do that with this tool and this tool, but that's true, you can. However, this one's also free, and we're going to have all of the images and icons of the tools and the flow icons and all of those things preloaded, so you just drag and drop on there, and you're off to the races of being able to start to tell the story around how you can improve value stream within your page.
Well, looking at things systemically, even if you think you know the system, the process really well, at least my going through things like that, you discover, I don't really know what happens here. I kind of do, but I don't really know. So I need to go learn that or figure that out, or somebody who's mapping this out. Right. And then to your point is, once you've got that, you've increased your understanding of what we do, or the flow of what we do. Where do we work? Right? You're going to go with a theory of constraints, and let's look for a bottleneck. Let's look for, we need a feature over a technical debt is where a value is. And you start to connect it into the system of creating software, which is, imagine, more of the paid version of Connect All.
Well, so the paid version will operationalize your connections, right? Where we can actually, you'll see the flow of work, and we do the integrations, the connections, the triggering, the capturing. We offer all the top stuff a VSM platform can do at Connect All. I normally, for these talks, I don't talk much about our great product, which is really, really great. We got a brand new release 2.11 coming out that has some great, I'm using platitudes by saying great, but it has some really great features coming out in the future. Usually when I talk, I want to help the industry. I want to help the space. And that helps me, of course. But here, this free tool will get you up and running. You can see, measure, you can do some measurement stuff in there. And actually, you can put your measurements in there and actually tell a story to your boss. So when I was on a conference recently, and somebody was said, well, to do value stream management, you need to go talk to your boss and have him approve the project and build a little community and figure out how you're going to adopt value stream management principles and do all this stuff. And I started to feel like, here we go again with community and adoption and the feel good part of it. And all of that is really relevant when you think about Agile, when you think about DevOps. Right, that is relevant. DevOps is a culture shift. And a culture shift, I've spoken on this before, is transforming operations and DevOps to work so well together. And when operations is normally command and control, right? Can't have access to those servers because of this reason. I used to be that guy, so I can speak to it with great understanding. And having people change that mindset and culture so they collaborate better. This is value stream management. You map the value stream. You look for waste. You point it out. You try to figure out how to remove it. And you work with people to do it. Don't get me wrong, but it's not, there's no sprints. There's no ceremonies. Once you've done it, you look at it, figure out how to improve it. You improve it. You modify your map. And by the way, you can save these and come back. And then you look for the next place to improve flow. It's not, I'm for the other stuff. I'm just saying this is value stream management. This is lean thinking. It's been around forever. It doesn't require all this other stuff. Go do it.
I think that from an end user perspective, I would think that now I have a way of dipping my toe in the water, maybe more than that, to really understand what's going on. I can decide now. I can decide to go to the next place, whatever that looks like with Connect.
So I can go map it out, and then
I'm not making a big bet that this thing is going to do stuff for us, but I just don't know. Right? You know how you're going to get value, pun intended.
So we're really excited about it.
Well, congratulations. When this airs, actually, I think it'll be when this is released. So how do folks get a hold of this? Is this connectall.com? Is it combined?
Right at connectall.com. You'll see a link there on the homepage, says go to designer, and it'll come up. We're not looking for tons of lead information. We don't want to know how many people are in your company. And, I got to control over that. All we want is maybe an email, and you're off to the races, and you can save them, You can do all this stuff, and just use it to take that first step. And we have some partners who are using it to run consulting sessions and different things like that. So I think it's something that nobody's done yet. And I think it'll really help move value stream management forward.
Well, great. Well, congratulations on the launch of this EntrePoint, the value stream designer. And I'm going to check it out. So
I'd be happy to walk you through it. Well, I'll send you a copy of the turkey we made.
I would love to see the turkey. All right, Lance Knight, COO and President with ConnectAll. Thanks for joining us today, Lance.
Thank you.
Take care.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
This is Digital Anarchist.
I have the great pleasure of being joined by Sam Bakken. Sam is Director of Product Marketing with OneSpan. Welcome, Sam.
Hey, thanks so much. Really excited to talk to you today.
Great to talk with you too. Let's start out, if you just introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about OneSpan too.
Yeah, so, long story short, OneSpan protects the world from digital fraud. The majority of our customers are financial institutions, and we help them make sure that they are, implementing authentication securely in a user-friendly way. Whether that's web banking, but it's really remote and digital channels that we're helping them protect. And, we've helped prevent billions of dollars in fraud, and, over half, I think, of the top 100 financial institutions in the world are our customers. So that's kind of what OneSpan does.
Excellent. Well, our topic that we want to talk about is super apps, and particularly in the context of financial institutions. There's a lot of super apps around. Maybe could you kind of give us a working definition of what a super app is in the context of, financial transactions, financial institutions? We don't need to go into, WeChat or whatever, but.
Yeah, well, but it really does help set the stage a little bit to at least kind of talk about where they're coming from. But I definitely understand why you kind of phrase it that way. But great question, right? So really what it kind of boils down to is it's sort of an all-in-one mobile app. That's like the epitome of a super app. And you mentioned WeChat in the East, and those sorts of experiences have existed for a long time. But where it all came from was, let's think about Alipay. And Alipay had this marketplace online, and they allowed people to purchase goods. But some people did not exactly trust remote payments at that time. And don't get me wrong, this was like a decade ago when this was really starting out. So Alipay said, all right, what we're going to do is we're going to institute a system where the consumers that are using our app to shop, they're going to send their funds to us, and we'll hold on to them until the vendor themselves actually sends the goods and the person receives them themselves. And so people, users of the app quite liked that. It was convenient. The user base was there. There were a ton of people there using these payment services. And so it started to turn into a thing where it was like, well, why not let people pay each other through this app? And then that also extended into, why don't we allow people to pay brick and mortar merchants as well through this app? Because people were, they enjoyed the convenience of that experience, right? And as some listeners may or may not know, in China specifically, they really kind of leapfrogged over credit cards. They were not using payment cards like we do here in the.
It sounds like they're bypassing the whole merchant system and credit cards, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, so they didn't have the plastic. And then the other thing I should have mentioned too is they didn't start accessing the internet in the same way that we did. They never really had time with a laptop and a desktop. It was like they were on their mobile phone. And I don't know, if you do this, but I love making payments just with my mobile phone, the convenience of that, not having to carry the card around. But again, the point is, this is how Alipay kind of started. And, they've been extending services since then. People can, WeChat's another example. People can make, doctor's appointments. They can make appointments to have their dry cleaning picked up and, dropped off and that sort of thing. So some people can run their whole lives through these apps in the East. I've been talking a little bit there. So that's kind of where it came from, right? But then, in terms of these apps and sort of what they mean maybe for us in the West and why, financial services institutions are thinking about this. First of all, you and me being in the West, I don't know about you, but one of my favorite kind of examples of, a use for a super app here is I live in Iowa City. I got to use a parking meter app in order to pay for my on-street parking. That's a single-use app. That's the only thing I use that app for. It's many screens back in the sort of catalog of 80 or more apps on my phone. And the other thing is, not only is it single-use, not only is it taking up a little bit of space on my device, I don't necessarily trust the security practices of that app, right? I don't really know who that developer is. I look at their website and I download the app and stuff, but there's not a lot said there about security. And so I guess my point is, where it comes to be something that's sort of relevant to financial services and stuff is I'd much rather have my bank offer me a feature like that works out in the real world, kind of no matter where I am. There's a payment involved. I trust my bank, then I know that they're held to a higher standard probably than some of these other developers. And so, integrating, features like that into a banking app starts to make a lot of sense to me. And it's just, it makes things more convenient, and I definitely feel safer as a consumer myself.
I don't know if this makes it more complicated, or I doubt it simplifies it, but PayPal introduced, right, their super app. And that, how is that viewed as part of this whole ecosystem when you have sort of what's happened in the, eastern part of the world? Now PayPal introduced there. Is that I don't know, the word used, is a threat to the financial institutions? Is it, partner to work with? How does their super app fit into this whole setting? Yeah,
for sure. So PayPal definitely making inroads here. A lot of press releases going out saying they want to release a super app, et cetera, et cetera. I sometimes think to myself that I'm not sure that, consumers care about that term super app. What they care about is an app that helps them get things done. Sure. But yeah, right. PayPal is really making inroads here for sure. They're starting to accept direct deposit, bill pay, have some digital wallet capabilities, peer-to-peer payments, shopping tools, and you can buy crypto and that sort of thing. So those are all, features that we, associate with kind of, fintechs or banks. And that's, PayPal is a big player. I don't actually know what their user-based numbers are right now, but some people like using PayPal, and they'll probably like to use PayPal for some of those other features as well, now that they're made available to them.
I think there's a data science term for their user base. It's called really big.
Yeah. Oh, yes, that is. I'm glad to hear that you are a data scientist.
I just play one on TV, but okay. Yeah. Anyway, that's beside the point. Well, so let's talk about then, from a one-span perspective, obviously, in working with financial institutions, how do you go about securing those transactions in super apps, whether they're, wherever they're coming from, the tie into, what banks have to think about, what financial service institutions have to consider?
Yeah, for sure. And, we've helped, there's one customer of ours, Belfius Bank, that started to get into this, right? They're expanding the features and services that they offer in their app. Now, whenever you're doing something like that, when you're opening up a new service, you're potentially partnering with a third party to kind of enable that and stuff. And anytime you're doing that, it's just a fact that you're expanding your attack surface, right? You're opening up the possibility of attack, because you're doing more than you previously did. So, in a lot of cases, that sometimes worries banks because, they maybe worry about that mobile channel. The devices that people use, they're not necessarily all up to date. The bank doesn't manage those devices themselves. They can't, require certain security aspects.
Well, we say it's security, but it's trust ultimately, right?
Well, right. Yeah.
That's what you put your money where you do, because you trust the bank, you trust the organization. If that's gone, it's all gone, right?
Oh, right. For sure. Yeah. And if you, like you said, for decades, that's where we've put our money, and we've, done digital transactions and stuff because we trust that bank. And yeah, like you said, if their reputation were somehow harmed because of a scalable attack and they're in the headlines or something like that, that's going to, affect consumers' perspective there. So you want to prevent that. But you need to also, these banks, and they do, and our customers do this, but, you can't go hide in the corner. You still have to offer more features. You want to grow, you want to have more customers, you want to retain your customers with the new cool features. And this can be done in a secure way. I always say that, in a lot of these cases, a lot of the sort of super apps, they've really nailed user experience. And what user experience is, it's like a delightful experience, of course, but it's also like, don't get in the way of someone trying to do something.
Right.
Regardless of how sort of risky or not it is. And then you can kind of step up the actions you take if someone's going to send, $5,000 to someone they've never sent money to before. Obviously, you want to take note of that and potentially say, is this really you on your device making this payment? Of course. What I'm trying to get to is a lot of times I think of the authentication process as kind of the front door to a mobile app in a lot of cases. I have apps on my phone in a similar situation where they tend to be a little bit more, let's just say they're a financial services app as well. But I have to enter in a username. I have to enter in a password. I have to get an SMS that has a one-time password in it for me to enter it in. I've told you 3 things that I have to do so far, versus maybe another app that I have where I just can look at the camera and via facial recognition, I'm logged into the app. I'm not saying that everybody wants that facial recognition feature. My point is the fact that app, all I have to do is look at it to get in there. I'm going to choose that app when I need to get something done quickly, rather than the other app where that experience is such a sort of hassle, really, when it comes down to it. So, authentication is definitely, again, it's sort of a continual it's a continual first impression. Every time someone's using their app, you're kind of hitting some signal in their brain and they're remembering whether it was frustrating or whether they maybe didn't even notice. Again, what OneSpan can do there is we can help you implement and modernize your authentication practices on your app so that you're both increasing security and providing a better user experience. And then, in addition to that, also, like I was talking about, the mobile devices themselves, you don't manage them. You don't know exactly what's going on there in terms of security hygiene. But what you can do is actually secure the app itself. So you put a border around that app. So when it's on the App Store and someone downloads it, you have security controls that are implemented around that app so that it itself is secured even on, in a hostile environment. So maybe a jailbroken or rooted phone, which are typically less secure, you can, be confident that nonetheless that app that you've created and is facilitating payment transactions is still secure because there is this technology that's detecting malicious behavior that might be interfering with it to shut it down before any damage is done. So those are a couple of the big ways that OneSpan helps in these situations.
So if I understand you right, it's since things are happening inside these super app, inside the apps involving all these kind of transactions, financial transactions, sort of keeping the front door secure, like the way you get in to be able to do all that stuff and not adding yet again more steps you have to do to perform those transactions. Now inside the app, you've taken the steps to identify yourself, get access to it, et cetera. And you have more freedom for a positive experience for the customer rather than, I'm going to this provider for this financial transaction and they do it this way versus this one does it a different way. Well, let's just kind of take care of that, provide an easy common interface up front. Am I getting it? Am I on the right track?
Sure. For sure. And I mean, it's like, it's definitely kind of as simple as you said. It's just us thinking of ourselves as humans and how we want to do these things ourselves. And that's what users want, is that convenience there, like you said.
Yeah, totally makes sense. So as you work with customers, are you finding you have to kind of redesign that front end experience? Or are you kind of replacing or putting your process in place of how to provide that front door and sort of protect the exterior of the app? How do you work with customers to do that?
Yeah, I mean, we say that we're really helping some banks modernize authentication. A lot of them maybe haven't updated their processes in a long time, and now is a good time to do it. Technology has gotten to this place where there's things like behavioral biometrics where you can, as a person is sort of interacting with the app, a profile has been built of that person's behavior and where they hit the buttons and at what angle do they hold their phone and that sort of thing. And so that's an opportunity to be doing this authentication without getting in the way at all. Now, it alone is not enough, but it just helps you only ask for that additional challenge when absolutely necessary. But yeah, it's a modernization thing. It's, hey, let's try to get away from SMS at this point. There are some vulnerabilities there. Of course, I always want to say this, SMS is better than nothing at all. It absolutely is. However, there are still some weaknesses there. So I think it's time we try to start moving away from that. And like I said, implementing biometrics at the front door is a great way to start with that. And so we sell tools that allow banks to integrate this functionality into their existing mobile apps so that they can modernize that authentication. And then, of course, we have our professional services teams where, in certain cases, if people are trying to get more done, we can also help them with that. But in addition, that this other technology that I was telling you about that kind of wraps the app and protects it in hostile environments, that's we actually do in a way that's called low code, where you don't have to be a developer and coding and ones and zeros and integrating code into these apps. You can just take an existing app. You go to a cloud interface, a customer portal. You go there, you upload your app, you configure it based on the security that you want, and then you essentially hit go, and then you get that app back, and it's wrapped with this advanced security. And that can literally, people typically don't believe me when I say it, but you can do that in 5 minutes. I mean, the configuration, you have to think about it, of course, but once you got that down, it's just up and down in like 5 minutes. So that ease of use is a big deal too, because it helps our customers, get to market with that new innovation faster, with the confidence that they are protected as well.
Oh, very good. Well, it's interesting times. I mean, especially with the acceleration of everything going digital, it's that evolutionary step has become almost revolutionary of how fast we've advanced into it. Sometimes it's a little hard to keep up with, I think, for everyone, whether a financial institution or person using the apps.
Yeah.
What's a way that someone can get started working with OneSpan?
I think going to onespan.com is going to be a great way to kind of see what we have to offer and read stories about how we've helped a number of financial institutions, some just like I'm sure some of our listeners here. I'd really recommend getting to the website to take a look at what we have. Bunch of great content there. White papers, but also, short videos talking about what you can do quickly to do a better job protecting your apps and that sort of thing. So onespan.com, that's my recommendation.
Okay, excellent. Sounds simple enough. I've suspected that might where we need to go. Didn't take too much to get that leap of faith there. Well, Sam Bakken, Director of Product Marketing with OneSpan, good to talk with you today. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks so much, Mitch. This was great.
Take care.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, welcome back. Rounding out today's Techstrong TV broadcast, we have The View with Vizard, in which Mike Vizard speaks with Mark Cheshire, who is the Director of Product for Application Services at Red Hat, and they discuss why IT organizations will need a service mesh to manage APIs. Fascinating topic, great conversation. Let's go ahead and get to it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Mark Cheshire, who is Director of Product at the Red Hat Application Services Group. Mark, welcome to the show.
Hi, pleased to be here. Thank you.
There's a lot going on with APIs and security these days. A lot of folks use everything from proxy software to API gateways to now service meshes to manage all this stuff. What's your sense of what I should use when and where, and at what point do maybe I need to think about a service mesh?
Perhaps to answer that, it's worth having a look back on how we get to where we are today. And everything basically has its origins around SOA, or service-oriented architecture. That's the kind of origins of everything we do, how we organize distributed application environments. And from those beginnings, things basically took two kind of separate tracks. There was one track, which was the track for APIs, and there's another track for microservices. The way that APIs evolved was that web companies in the era just after 2000s found that the SOA approach was just too heavyweight, and they needed to find a better, more rapid way to be able to engage large groups of developers to build on their web APIs. And that brought about rapid adoption of REST APIs as one of the more simple ways that an API could be adopted, very simple security mechanisms, and it's led to an absolute explosion. It's essentially driven what we know now as the API economy, where companies like Expedia drive the majority of their revenue through their API channel rather than their website. That has been picked up by enterprises who are applying these same API concepts within their enterprise. So that was one path. The second path on microservices is similar lines of simplification, that within enterprises, companies wanted the benefits of SOA, but they didn't want the overhead. And microservices have evolved down the path with the help of containers in order to be able to separate out all of the advanced network routing and traffic management capabilities to isolate that out of the responsibility of the application services themselves. So that's essentially where microservices have ended up and what service mesh contributes to managing microservice environments.
Are we seeing a lot more APIs because each of those microservices seems to have its own API, or do multiple microservices share an API? And how do I deal with the proliferation of all those APIs?
It's been an explosion in the early days when the origins of Red Hat API management was started. It was a small company, 3Scale. There were no vendors offering anything like API management at the time. And the early companies in this space would manage maybe one or two APIs. Over the next 5 years, it grew to maybe 10 or so. Where we are today with microservices is that companies are looking to manage thousands of services at a time. So it's been a real explosion.
When do I reach the tipping point where I need a service mesh? Because I think a lot of people have a lot of different ways of going about managing this thing, but at what point does a service mesh become indispensable?
when a company's going down the path of microservices and microservice architecture, when they're just starting with a handful of services, it's probably easy enough to manage these non-service requirements ad hoc, deciding ad hoc if you want to build in circuit breaking or if you want mutual TLS between any two service endpoints. As soon as you start to scale that up to tens and hundreds of services, it becomes you're repeating that work too often, and there's too much risk that the traffic management aspects are not correctly taken care of. So it's when you hit that scale that you really want to take a reliable approach to deploying a service mesh and have a consistent approach that all of your developers can take advantage of.
There are a lot of options when it comes to service meshes these days. Some are lighter than others. Do you guys have any sense of which one to use, why? Or is there one that Red Hat's kind of standardizing on? And if so, why?
The Red Hat approach is building on top of, like all Red Hat. It builds up on 100% open source software. Red Hat is strongly committed to Istio, which was started between Red Hat, Google, and IBM. It's one of the leading service mesh platforms, and Red Hat is a major contributor. So that's the core of Red Hat's service mesh offering. Beyond Istio itself, there are also complementary technologies which are part of bringing the true benefits of service mesh. So there's also observability with a project called Kiali, and there's tracing to be able to do application tracing end-to-end, and then do drill down of transaction response times. That's powered by Open Tracing and open source project called Jaeger.
It also seems like a service mesh provides a new layer of abstraction above the network layer and even the security layer, and makes that underlying layer more programmable. And so my question to you is, do you think IT organizations appreciate the role service meshes might play more broadly as we kind of move towards the integration of NetOps and DevOps and SecOps and how all that comes together?
Yes, indeed. And at its heart, everything around Istio is programmable. It's Kubernetes native in the sense that everything that you use to deploy a service mesh with Istio can all be done programmatically by defining custom resources and applying those custom resources in a programmatic way, all with the goal of being able to automate your IT infrastructure and application infrastructure. So absolutely key to the way that DevOps and developers want to roll this out.
Is there a particular language that's going to emerge as the primary way to extend those service meshes? Is there something that organizations should be learning how to use today?
One of the benefits of service mesh is that it works at the network layer, and it's truly language agnostic. So it doesn't matter whether your service endpoints are between services, whether they're REST API endpoints, whether it's gRPC, or whether it's events, messages and events. So any of these are all valid protocols to use when using a service mesh to manage the environment.
Mm-hmm. Istio has a reputation for being somewhat complex, maybe almost as complex as Kubernetes in some ways. Is Istio getting easier to deploy? How do you think this whole service mesh will evolve?
It's been a big focus of development to make performance improvements, and as part of the developments, there's been a fairly significant re-architecture of Istio. There's always been a separation between the control plane and the data plane, and it used to be that the data plane was more tightly coupled with a control plane, and almost all service requests would be delegated for a response to the control plane. With a new architecture, the data plane can work a lot more asynchronously of the control plane and take decisions independently. So that means that it's a lot more performant and it's a lot more scalable than it was in the past.
Who's in charge of making the decision about a service mesh? Is it a development team, a DevOps team, or is it a networking team, or who's kind of take the lead on this?
It's not necessarily one group that takes the lead. It's a very close alignment between the developer organization and the operations team or DevOps team. And what the developer team wants is a platform where they've got all of the advanced traffic routing capabilities abstracted away, so they don't have to create that tooling again and again for their services. And they're looking to the DevOps team to provide that environment as a service almost that they can just build on top of. DevOps, on the other hand, they're looking for ways to make it easier and easier for developers to be more productive. So part of what they want to do, sometimes it can be driven by DevOps to bring in as part of container platform, to bring in a service mesh to be able to make it easier for their developers to scale out and adopt microservices. So it can come from both angles, but at the end of the day, there needs to be a very close alignment between these two teams.
There's going to be multiple service meshes. We're humans. People pick different things for different reasons. Is there a lot of work being done on interoperability between service meshes? Can I connect one service mesh to another? And what does that look like?
There are standardization efforts. So there's initiative to unify the interface to service meshes. At the moment, there isn't a clear adoption by all of the service mesh vendors to be able to unify behind a single open interface. So it's a work in progress, and clearly it would bring benefits to everybody in the industry.
Do you think that this will accelerate some sort of convergence between network operations and DevOps teams? Because I asked the question because networking has always felt, to me at least, left outside of the DevOps equation. And I think if I look at a service mesh, this is a way to more tightly integrate that function with the rest of the IT organization.
Yes, there's a huge amount of change in this area, probably more than we can go into today. But very briefly, when building out service meshes and microservice architecture, it's straightforward when you think about doing this in a single cluster. But very often, companies want to start looking at deploying a mesh across multiple clusters. And how do I connect these clusters together? And from within the service mesh, they'll also be looking to connect services to external services, to, say, legacy services or data stores that are completely on a different site. In order to be able to establish all of this connectivity, there will be a blending of network connectivity and application connectivity into the service mesh. And Red Hat's got a number of projects underway, which we've just recently introduced advanced container management, which includes very advanced inter-cluster connectivity. And we will be delivering additional capabilities to be able to do service-to-service connectivity next year.
You mentioned REST APIs, and yet we see a lot of what I would call, I guess, GraphQL-based APIs. Are they going to be part of the service mesh as well, or do I need a separate service mesh for different types of APIs?
It goes back to the nature of service meshes being very much at the network level and being agnostic of the payload or the language. In a way, you can think of GraphQL as being a protocol-dependent implementation of an interface. So service mesh on its own doesn't really care whether GraphQL is one of the service endpoints. That takes us into the domain more of API management. Now, everything we've been talking about up till now people would probably recognize that as being east-west traffic. It's within your enterprise, you're managing relationships between services, and in short, people refer to that as east-west. When going into the realm of API management, people typically recognize that as being north-south traffic and how to manage the interface or the boundary between your company and external consumers of your services. So typically through a public API interface, and that might be customers looking to integrate or partners who are looking to build on your ecosystem. And that world of API management is where GraphQL fits in. So it's one of the ways, whether it's GraphQL or gRPC or events or REST APIs, these are all different approaches that customers will choose to be able to integrate.
So what's your best advice for folks to get started with this? I think sometimes they get intimidated by a new technology or they don't know what to do with it. Is there some point of entry that you would advise people to start playing around with this now? And what does that look like?
It's the key advice I'd give is not to boil the ocean, to have very specific objectives and to aim to deliver results on those initial objectives early before expanding. Let me give an example. So we talked about north, south, and east, west traffic, and essentially API management and service mesh. One of the topics that you introduced at the beginning is when do I use service mesh and when do I use API management? So you could use them independently or you can use them together. The key use case to use them together is when you've got very large microservice environments. And it goes beyond the scale of kind of pizza box developer teams. They can't just share each other's code for a definition of an interface. They actually need to have more formal interfaces. And so in a large organization, you may have a group of developers doing finance applications, another group doing sales applications. And their services have to communicate. And when they communicate, you want to manage that communication the same way as you do with external APIs using API management. So in a way, you've got some north-south type management capabilities required inside the microservice environment. Now, if you try to design everything from the beginning to do API management and service mesh, you'll probably be forever on the drawing board with your design. So my recommendation is to pick and choose. Do you want to start first? Where's your greater pain point? Is it more along the lines of API management, managing the relationship between the producer of a service and multiple consumers? Or is it more in the lines of establishing a zero trust network, ensuring resilience for communication between your microservices, in which case service mesh would be a better starting point? The important thing is that you can easily take what you've developed from one starting point and expand to add API management in the future, or begin with API management and add service mesh.
All right, we're on the cusp of 2022, looking into the next year. Is this the year of the service mesh, or are we still got another year of experimentation and testing before we deploy this stuff in large scale?
We did a survey of cloud native developer technologies in this year, and one of the things that came out of it was just how important microservices and APIs were. Microservices already adopted by 49% of organizations that responded. We had more than 800 organizations respond to the survey. And we see the respondents expect that 30% of them will be adopting microservices in the future. So the growth is very, very rapid, and it's starting from a good solid base. I do expect that the existing installations are not that large in size typically. So I think that we'll see a significant ramp up in the size of service mesh deployments in 2022.
All right, folks, you heard it here first. There's going to be a service mesh in your future. Mark, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. Bye-bye.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
All right, everybody, that wraps up another Techstrong TV broadcast. I hope you enjoyed today's conversations. They were jam-packed with information, lots of takeaways in today's episode. We have one more event coming up, so I want to remind you of it. It's happening this week. December 9th. It is called FinCon DX. It is a virtual summit. We do invite you to join us for it. You can go to techstrongevents.com to check out the agenda and the speaker lineup and register. It's a great virtual summit that is mostly aimed at the financial services and FinCon crowd, but there are takeaways for every industry there. So I hope you can join us for that. And I will be back tomorrow with a new Techstrong TV broadcast for you, so I hope you can join me then. Until then, I hope everybody has a great day, and please, whatever you do, stay safe.